Everyone knows the famous saying, I think, therefore I am, but sometimes your body moves before your brain does. Suddenly, a woman shouted the name of a child, Rudy, and demanded to know if he knew how expensive that plate was. The poor child, voice trembling, begged Ramanda for forgiveness. The woman screamed abuse at him, saying he couldn't even wash a plate properly, calling him a useless piece of trash. Ramanda raised her hand, ready to strike. But in that instant, the protagonist rushed over and stopped her. The woman was furious and demanded to know what the director was doing. It all started when the protagonist picked up a book. At the time, she lived in a city with 1 million unemployed youths, just another ordinary face in a sea of job seekers. Her situation was harder than most, an orphan since childhood, raised in a group home, Orphanage, with only a high school diploma. She had no connections and no impressive academic background to rely on. Finding a job seemed as hard as reaching the sky, but somehow she miraculously found work at an obscure little company. But just when she thought her life was finally stabilizing, the company went under and she was back on the streets. But she couldn't bear the shame of going back to the group home and telling them everything. Even as an adult, she had stayed involved, supporting them financially and helping care for the children, who all called her big sister. She felt like the matriarch of that family, especially since the place was already struggling to survive. But no matter how hard she tried, the group home eventually closed down. She asked the director what would happen to the children. She was crushed by an immense sense of loss, guilt, and powerlessness because she hadn't been able to protect those little ones. These emotions consumed her. She wandered the streets aimlessly, eventually spending her days reading in a rental bookstore. Just as she was losing interest, a story caught her attention, a book titled Eternal Scars. It was filled with every cliché trope you could imagine. The male and female leads grew up in the same orphanage, where the director was an absolute devil. She abused the children and even involved them in shady dealings. They called her the worst woman, and she was always screaming at them to shut their stinking mouths. The title Eternal Scars referred to a scar the director left on the girl's thigh. Interestingly, years later, the male lead recognized her by that very scar. Later, just as written in the book, the male lead led a rebellion, became emperor, and then tracked down the old director. At that time, she was working in a mine, and the male lead didn't hesitate to order his men to teach her a lesson she would never forget. Then, he executed her right in front of the protagonist. The protagonist noted that the scene was incredibly bloody, so she couldn't believe the book was rated for all ages. Anyway, the story ended with the male and female leads falling deeply in love. Then the protagonist wondered if she had gotten so absorbed in the story that she had transmigrated into the body of the orphanage director. She could accept being kicked out of the bookstore for having no money, but dying on the street would be too miserable. The girl thought that dying quickly might actually be a stroke of luck, because she was terrified of pain. But none of that mattered now, because she was destined to be torn to pieces by the male lead. The heroine was freaking out about this, thinking, seriously, people can't come back to life, right? She swore to herself, I will absolutely not let the story unfold like that. The lunch bell rang, and she thought, well, even if I'm in danger, I have to make sure these kids are fed first. She remembered that in her past life, the orphanage always ensured they ate well. She smelled something and guessed it was soup day. And just then, she bumped into a child in the hallway. The little girl was clearly terrified. She apologized to the director, saying she hadn't seen her standing there. The protagonist asked if the girl was hurt, and after confirming she was okay, told her to go eat. But the girl thought the director's smile looked a bit scary. The little girl bowed and addressed the director as ma'am. Then she ran out of the dining hall as fast as she could, leaving our protagonist wondering if she planned to eat lunch outside. Our protagonist heard a loud crash from the dining hall, sounding like something had fallen. A caregiver named Ramanda was screaming at a girl named Rudy. The woman angrily asked her if she knew how much that plate cost. She claimed it was the director's favorite plate. Rudy sobbed, trying to apologize to Ramanda, but Ramanda just kept cursing, calling Rudy a useless waste who couldn't even wash dishes properly. Just then, another child stood up for Rudy, saying she had already apologized. But Ramanda flew into a rage, slapped Claude, and told him to mind his own business. She sneered that if apologies were useful, what was the point of rules? Claude retorted that plates aren't unbreakable, and besides, Washing dishes was supposed to be the caregiver's job. When someone dared to speak to her like that to her face, she was furious, asking if he was serious. In that moment, her anger seemed to peak, and she raised her hand to strike. Another frightened child ran in front of their friends, shouting, "Don't you touch them," and spreading their arms to protect them. Just then, everyone noticed the director standing in the doorway, and the children whispered her name in surprise and fear. Ramanda turned around and asked what the director was doing. The director was furious and snapped back that Ramanda should be asking herself that question. Then, she noticed a pink-haired girl running worriedly to the crying Rudy. The girl thought that child might be the female lead, Run, who was asking if Rudy was okay. The protagonist remembered that Run, who loved Rudy like a biological sister, and that black-haired child, Claude, were the main characters of this novel. Then her attention shifted to another child, the oldest one in the orphanage. The girl suddenly realized there was a child named Jack Frith, who didn't exist in the novel's future at all. She couldn't believe she was seeing the novel's protagonists with her own eyes. Seeing them as children, she was finally completely certain that she had truly entered the world of the book. The protagonist thought with horror about the environment these children were living in. She realized the situation was much worse than she had imagined. Just then, Ramanda told the director to let go of her arm. The director asked Ramanda if she really intended to hit a child with that hand. Ramanda started making excuses, begging her to listen to her explanation. She explained that Rudy had broken a plate the director cherished very much. The woman claimed she just wanted to scold the girl a little, but Claude interfered and actually dared to talk back. So she had no choice. The director asked Ramanda if washing dishes wasn't her job and questioned why she was making the children do it. Then the girl remembered the contents of the book. The director had an abusive maid, and the director, caring only about donations, turned a blind eye to it, causing the maid's abuse to intensify. Due to mismanagement, the Empire's funding was cut. After the maid left, the director began abusing the children herself. The current director coldly told Ramanda she was fired. Ramanda was furious and asked what she was talking about. She demanded an explanation, asking what exactly she had done wrong to be fired. Ramanda defended herself fiercely, claiming she was only doing what the director had previously told her to do. To this, the heroine firmly replied that she had never told Ramanda to abuse the children. She added that, from what she could see, Ramanda was even making the children do the chores that she had assigned to Ramanda. She ordered her to leave immediately, brooking no argument. As Ramanda left, she said the director would regret this. The heroine thought with disgust, what kind of monster lays a hand on a child? She was glad she had successfully driven Ramanda away. Then the girl asked if the children were okay, but they all avoided her, looking at her with suspicious eyes. She thought remorsefully that seeing the novel's protagonists as children, she must have gotten carried away without realizing it. She felt that someone who stood by while they were bullied was no different from a devil. The girl sadly concluded that of course the children would hate and resent her. Stammering, struggling to find the right words, she finally whispered, "I am very sorry." She vowed not to let the children suffer anymore and announced that they wouldn't have to wash dishes from now on, wishing them a good meal. The children were left in the dining hall, completely bewildered. The protagonist herself was terrified, thinking that everything happening was simply a nightmare, and wondering what that woman, the former director, had actually done to the children. She firmly declared that she wouldn't let this situation continue and realized she needed to return her office. Opening the door, she found food on the table. The heroine thought she could finally have a proper meal as she had hoped, even if she was alone. Suddenly, she remembered the small child she had bumped into near the dining hall. This made her lose her appetite, but she knew she still had to eat. She thought painfully that this food was likely made by the children themselves. She repeated to herself again that this was all just a damn nightmare, then began to blame herself, feeling like a failure of an adult for not handling the situation better. She noticed the children had already cleaned the dining hall, which made her wonder just how badly they had been abused before. She hoped they could at least relax in their rooms, but then she spotted a spider lazily crawling down nearby. The protagonist bolted out of the office as if electrocuted, deciding on the spot to fix this place up as soon as possible. After touring the orphanage, she decided to sell everything of value. Seeing that the children were barely fed while the boss here lived in king-like luxury made her furious. She found ornaments and dresses whose luxury exceeded even that of high-ranking aristocrats. The protagonist remembered that the original owner of this body, Sierra Pilot, was a low-ranking noble from the countryside. All this excessive luxury had eventually bankrupted her. She realized with disgust that the orphanage was falling apart, and the old director was living a life of luxury on the orphanage's donations. No wonder Claude would tear her to pieces. She had certainly given the children reason to hate nobles. She examined her new appearance, noting that even wearing the most modest dress, the neckline was too low. Nevertheless, the protagonist looked in the mirror and thought, "For a villainess, I look pretty good." All right, she decided it was time to hit the road. She thought that with these long arms and legs, she could carry the luggage herself. "Sigh, it's going to be a busy day. I have to run to several places, and when I get back, I have to take that damn bell off the door. Should I tell the kids I'm going out for a bit? No, that would only scare them. They're probably still shaken from what happened this morning. Besides, if the thing they fear approaches them again, it will only make them more silent." Meanwhile, the children watched her from the window, curious about where she was going with so many things. "Hey, what's going on outside?" Jack asked. "The boss just went out with a bunch of junk that looks valuable." Eddie replied. "That which?" The boy shouted furiously. Just then, Claude appeared and asked, "What's all the noise?" He was carrying Ren on his back, who looked weak and pale. It seemed the director had finally arrived. She sighed in relief, thinking that if it weren't for the scene in the book where Claude and Ren escape, she might still be wandering around, lost. She remembered that was the part where they couldn't take the director's bullying anymore and sneaked away. She recalled from a book that the children ran away to go to a festival, but were caught before they got very far. This made her wonder when this year's festival was, and exactly how old the children were. The protagonist complained inwardly that even after searching the director's office and going through all the documents, she couldn't find any information about the children. How could someone who didn't even care about running the orphanage care about the children? She only knew that Ren had a high fever when she was 10. Finally, she decided to ask Jack when he returned, and she needed to figure out what season it was so she could make a plan. She walked to the carriage rental place and greeted the man politely, but he didn't answer immediately because he was busy checking her out. She thought with annoyance that even though she had worn one of the plainest dresses, she still stood out. Then she turned to the attendant again, this time with a firmer tone, saying she wanted to rent a carriage. The man told her renting a carriage cost 15 silver coins, but if she needed a driver, the price was 35 silver coins. She quickly converted it to modern currency in her head and was a bit surprised it was cheaper than she expected. So she booked a round-trip carriage with a driver. When they arrived at the jewelry store, the driver held out his hand to her. She thought that in this world, offering an escort service might just be politeness. But she didn't intend to accept the hand of someone looking at her like that, so she refused, saying it wasn't necessary. The girl told the driver to wait for her there, adding that she would go in alone from here. The jewelry store was magnificent, with display windows sparkling under the lights. As soon as she walked in, the jeweler greeted her. She told him she was there to sell some jewelry, and the jeweler said she had come to the right place. He began to boast about his shop, claiming no other place knew how to appreciate gems better. The girl dumped everything she had brought in her shawl onto the table. After looking at the goods, the jeweler commented that they were beautiful pieces and assured her they would meet her expectations. The jeweler asked her to wait a moment, adding that he would take some time to look closely. While the girl waited, she thought these jewels seemed much more valuable than she had imagined. She wouldn't have to worry about the shelter's funds for a while. After a moment, the jeweler confirmed that, as he thought, all the gems were of high quality, and offered 650 gold coins for everything. She converted this amount to modern currency in her head, and said to herself that although she didn't know their true value yet, the price seemed decent. The woman thought with annoyance that this guy had been looking down on her from the start. To the shopkeeper, she probably looked like a silly young girl who knew nothing about market prices. Then she directly accused the jeweler of looking down on her. When he tried to argue, asking what she meant, she stated firmly that he was trying to rip her off right to her face. In the director's office, the girl had discovered that she had embezzled over 1,000 gold coins in a year. She also learned that she had spent lavishly on luxury goods, using not only donations, but her own money. So our girl was certain these jewels were definitely worth more than 650 gold coins. The jeweler tried to defend himself, claiming she could see for herself that it was a fair and accurate estimate. To this, she coldly confirmed she did see it, and that was exactly why she knew she was right. She told him bluntly that he was treating her like some naive rich girl, and at first, she thought she was overthinking it. But after hearing the price, she realized she wasn't. She asked the jeweler if he was trying to insult and cheat a noble woman. She promised to make him pay for it. The jeweler was terrified, thinking it impossible, but she really was a noble. He began to beg for forgiveness, saying he was very sorry. The girl asked him if he now admitted trying to rip her off. The jeweler stammered, insisting it wasn't a scam. He just adjusted the price a little, that's all. Then, in an icy calm tone, she mused aloud whether she should shorten his lifespan a little. She added that it wasn't a threat, just a thought. The jeweler panicked again, bowing and scraping, repeatedly saying sorry. He offered to pay whatever price she wanted if she would just forgive him. The girl agreed, but on the condition that he pay the correct price this time, adding that she wasn't known for her patience. The jeweler, relieved, thanked her for giving him another chance and hurried away. Alone, the girl thought that the incident had made her so nervous her heart had almost stopped. She thought, thank goodness it was finally over, though she didn't fully understand how she had done it. The girl wondered, she had never possessed real power before, nor had she ever bossed people around like this. The frightened jeweler quickly assured her he would bring the money right away. She realized she couldn't keep playing the villain. After saying goodbye to the jeweler, the heroine was happy to find she had successfully sold everything for a good price. She counted her earnings with satisfaction, 9 runes and 50 gold, equivalent to 95 million won. Then she noted with indignation that the jeweler had tried to cheat her out of more than a quarter of the money and wondered if she should report him. Next, she started planning her expenses, deciding to use the money to buy food and clothes for the children and to repair the dilapidated orphanage. However, selling the dresses would bring in a bit more money. But thinking about returning everything she had taken from Sierra, she worried money would be tight. The girl noted with regret that she couldn't get a job herself. There was too much to do and too little money. She began rattling off a list of future expenses: food for the children, clothes, medical bills if they got sick. The protagonist remembered hearing that in Korea, raising one child costs about 100 million won. She did the math in her head and was completely horrified, realizing she had 5 children to care for. That would be 500 million won, basically 5,000 gold coins. Just then, the carriage carrying our heroine stopped in front of the market. The girl found herself in a super crowded market, packed like sardines. She remembered the boutique in the book only sold brand name goods. She realized that no matter how high-end Sierra's dresses were, a shop like that would never buy second-hand clothes. Our girl felt quite depressed, thinking she'd be lucky if they didn't laugh her out of the store. Finally, she found a place that looked promising and walked in. Someone greeted her, saying, "Welcome to Clover Fabric Shop. I wanted to ask if I could sell some clothes here." The shop owner explained that they cut and valued clothes based on the cost of the fabric. She asked the customer if that was okay, and the girl happily said it was perfect. After looking at the items, the shop owner was thrilled, pointing out that every dress was purchased from a high-end boutique. She excitedly listed them one by one, saying one dress was from Mariana's, another from Katana's, and a third was a super exclusive model. The shop owner asked again, as if in disbelief, "Are you really selling these?" and warned her that the price would be nowhere near what she bought them for. But the girl confirmed she wanted to sell them all. The shop owner said the dresses were in excellent condition and, considering the quality, offered 10 gold coins for each. For the out-of-print model, the shop owner offered 15 gold coins, asking, "How does that sound?" The girl quickly calculated. About 10 dresses at 10 gold coins each would add up to over 100 gold coins. While the shop owner went to get the money, our girl continued browsing. Something caught her eye. It was children's clothes, and she was completely captivated, thinking, these things are just too cute. She started imagining that pink-haired Run would look absolutely stunning in one of those dresses, and Rudy would be explosively cute in a romper. She also thought she could alter some clothes for Rudy herself, as she was quite handy with that sort of thing. The shop owner returned, asking if she saw anything she liked, and proudly pointed out every item in the shop. They were all handmade by her. Our girl showered the shop owner with praise, saying it was amazing she could make such beautiful clothes. The shop owner thanked her for the compliment and handed her 164 gold coins. The heroine thanked the shop owner and happily counted the money. The shop owner stammered that she was the one who should be saying thank you. Then she asked the heroine if she was interested in children's clothing, and the girl enthusiastically confirmed she was very interested. She explained she wanted to dress her little ones in some cute new clothes, so the shop owner asked if she had children. The girl confirmed it, and proudly said she had 5. The shop owner was stunned. The shop owner, Ms. Clover, began showing her the children's clothes. The customer noticed the fabric was durable, the sizes varied, and the clothes were well made, so the children would be comfortable moving around. Miss Clover said they made the children's clothes using leftover fabric scraps of various sizes. She noted with a hint of sadness that these clothes didn't sell very well, but emphasized that the fabric and design were top-notch. Then the girl firmly announced that she would buy all the children's clothes from here to there. Miss Clover asked in surprise, "All of them? These 15 sets?" The girl smiled and replied that it wasn't a waste at all. She wanted to see the children in new clothes. She thought to herself that she truly hoped the children would like these new clothes. The girl thought she would love to give the clothes to the children herself, but they might be terrified. Maybe passing them through someone else would be a better choice. Meanwhile, Miss Clover announced everything was packed and quoted a price of 1 gold coin. The girl asked in surprise, "Was that the price for all 15 sets?" She calculated mentally that it was only about 6,001 per set and asked if it was too cheap. Miss Clover explained somewhat embarrassedly that she was just grateful the customer was buying them. She felt it wouldn't be right to sell them for more. But our girl stood her ground, saying that wasn't good. She said these clothes were made with love, and she was sure Miss Clover deserved proper payment. The girl was adamant, saying she wanted to pay a fair price for the clothes her children would wear. So Miss Clover relented and told her the real price, 3 gold coins. Our girl assured her that the children would go crazy for these clothes and promised to become a regular customer. As she left, the girl told her to stop undervaluing herself. When our protagonist finally left the shop, the sun was already setting. The driver was waiting impatiently, even yawning a few times. Suddenly, he saw Lady Sierra carrying a huge pile of boxes and bags. He asked her to hand the things to him, and she thanked him. Then she said to herself with a hint of self-mockery, "Sierra, you're only 26, and you're already exhausted." The driver asked the girl where they were going next, and she immediately answered Sierra's orphanage. Looking at the things she bought, she said somewhat doubtfully that she had bought too much. Then she remembered that in the original story, Ren and Rudy had a talent for drawing, and Jack loved art very much. Sierra thought hopefully that they would like her gifts. She also wondered what Claude liked. She thought that since Claude was the male lead, he probably liked the female lead best. The girl thought that if she could win Ren's favor, maybe Claude's heart would melt too. The heroine began planning for the future, determined to raise the children well and live differently from the original work. Once the children were independent, she would close the orphanage and enjoy her old age undisturbed. She dreamed of living her own life, noting that she had always been tied down by orphanages. The girl concluded with a touch of irony that her new life was only slightly different, then closed her eyes. Just then, the driver announced, "We've arrived." She thanked him, said he did a good job, and asked him to carry the purchases inside. Back at the orphanage, she noticed they used magic stones as light bulbs and thought she should buy some too. Then she decided that if she wanted to give the clothes and other things to the children, she needed to call Jack over. She noted mentally that the children might be scared hearing someone come upstairs, so she had to be quiet. She asked softly if Jack was there, saying she had something to talk to him about, and asking for a minute. But no one answered, so the girl decided to go in and check herself. Finding the boys' room empty, she went to Ren's room and asked if she was inside. Still finding no one, Sierra asked herself anxiously, what on earth is going on? She tried to recall if anything similar had happened in the novel. That when I realized the children hadn't all gone missing together. Only Run and Clone had run away. Just then, the coachman said he had moved everything, but the female lead, terrified, cut him off. She screamed in despair that the children were gone, begging him to help find them. Ciela tried to calm herself down, thinking they couldn't have gone far, but was worried to discover that the novel's plot had changed. She thought that if this were the original story, the children running away wouldn't be a bad thing. After all, escaping to find a way to survive was better than being abused. But the female lead passionately declared that she was no longer the old Ciela. The female lead tried to analyze the situation, reasoning that since Rudy wasn't with them, the children couldn't have gone far. She admitted she didn't understand why the plot had changed, because the cautious and cold-blooded Jack would never have run away with the children. Meanwhile, Jack said to Clone that perhaps they should ask the director for help now. Clone retorted that Jack knew perfectly well that old, which wouldn't help them. He reminded Jack what happened the last time Rudy was sick and how the boss had flown into a rage because they were crying. Then, Rudy anxiously called out to Big Brother Jack, asking if Ren was going to die. Rin looked in bad shape, burning with a high fever and breathing with difficulty. Jack gently scolded Rudy, telling her not to talk like that. Rudy was still scared, asking what they would do if bad guys showed up. Jack tried to comfort her, saying everything would be fine. As long as they were together, nothing would happen. Then, he gently touched Rin's face and cursed in a desperate whisper as Rin's temperature spiked. He painfully admitted to himself that he shouldn't have brought Run and Rudy out. The boy hadn't expected so many people on the streets and wondered in despair where on earth they could go for help. While resting, Eddie complained that he was exhausted and had blisters on his feet, and Rudy also whimpered that her feet hurt. After a while, Clone suggested that if everyone was rested, they should keep moving. The child tried to take a step, but his legs began to give way. Just then, Jack stopped him and offered to carry Rin so Clone could catch his breath. Clone started to argue, saying Jack was weaker, but Jack retorted that wasn't true. He stubbornly claimed he was strong enough to carry her. Then, Clone reminded Jack that he always gave his rations to others, questioning where he would get the strength. Just then, someone called out to the children, and they all turned around in surprise. The stranger asked loudly where they were going. He told the little ones that a lady had been desperately looking for them. The children asked in surprise, "Which lady are you talking about?" Meanwhile, the director was still searching ceaselessly. She realized with growing despair that there was no trace of them to be found. She couldn't find them anywhere. She anxiously wondered if they had already reached the slums. The girl debated whether to go to the city guard, asking herself in despair what on earth she should do. She remembered how that little girl had cried. She had called out to her sister, saying she didn't want to go to another orphanage. The little girl had asked why she couldn't stay and live with her, reminding her that she had said she would be her mother. The director made up her mind, telling herself to search one more time. She had to find them. Just then, the coachman shouted for her to come over quickly, saying he had found the children and urging her to hurry. Hearing this, the girl whispered in relief, "Thank goodness." She sprinted to the scene, and the children saw our female lead arrive, gasping for breath. They thought she was going to fly into a rage and demand to know what they were doing there. But she didn't scream or shout. Instead, she gave them a gentle yet powerful hug, so tight that Clone could barely breathe. The girl let out a huge sigh of relief, saying it was so good to see they were all right. But she immediately began to doubt herself, remembering that Cielo wasn't close to the children. She worried they might start avoiding her because of this, thinking she shouldn't have changed her behavior so suddenly. The female lead felt her actions had made the atmosphere awkward, so she turned to Jack and asked why they had left the orphanage, even though she was sure they had run away because of her. Suddenly, Rudy's head popped out from behind Jack. The little girl quickly explained that Rin was sick. The director repeated in horror, "She's sick?" She looked at the pink-haired girl, exclaimed, "Oh my God," and asked how long she had been like this. Jack said Rin's temperature had spiked after she left. Rudy said they had tried everything to cool her down, but it only got worse, and they were planning to take her to the hospital. The director said painfully that a broken-down place like the orphanage naturally wouldn't have any medicine. Ciela gathered the sick girl into her arms. The female lead went to the coachman, told him the girl needed to get to a hospital as soon as possible, and asked if it was possible. The man agreed without hesitation and promised to get the carriage ready immediately. The girl knew Rudy was too small to bring along and was wondering what to do. Suddenly, Jack announced loudly that he would take responsibility for bringing the rest of the children back to the orphanage. This provoked a strong reaction from Clone, who questioned his brother if he really trusted this person. "Jack, enough!" Clone heard him yell. The coachman shouted, "Everyone get in, we need to go." Ciela turned to Jack. "You remember the way back, right?" The boy gave her a thumbs up. "I remember." The director said, "I'm counting on you, kid. Be careful on the way back." Then she added, "Hey, if you guys are hungry, feel free to make something to eat." Jack was stunned. "Wait, did she just say I'm counting on you?" The children's eyes went wide. "Wait, can we really eat the food?" Ciela tried to smile to ease the tension, but she soon sighed, realizing it had completely backfired. In the carriage, she thought sadly, "I never expected Ren to get sick today." It was hard to believe the little one was already 10 years old. The director said in a voice full of regret, "I feel terrible." She thought Ren must have already been unwell that morning, but had hidden it for fear of being scolded. After examining Ron, the doctor said she had a high fever and that if they had been any later, the situation could have been very dire. He said she would be fine with some proper rest. The director thanked him, then sat worriedly by Ren's bedside, noticing that the girl looked even thinner because of her illness. She sadly realized that it wasn't just Run. All the children were far too small and thin for their age. The female lead decided that once they got back, she would definitely give those children some truly nutritious food. Then she suddenly thought, if Rin is 10 now, the poor child might already have some. Development. She breathed a sigh of relief to find that the scar on her thigh mentioned in the book wasn't there yet. The girl thought that if Rin didn't have that scar, perhaps her relationship with the children wouldn't be completely destroyed. Just then, a delirious Rin called out for her mother, begging her not to leave Rin and Moen again, pleading with her mother not to abandon her, and apologizing over and over. Ciela softly told the girl she didn't need to cry or be afraid. Looking at the sick girl, she thought painfully that Rin hadn't even dared to say she was sick, while the other children had even run away. The girl firmly decided that now was not the time to worry about herself. The most important thing was to help the children. She made up her mind that she must do everything possible to ensure the children suffered no more pain and that they could grow up healthy and happy. The female lead promised herself she wouldn't let the children suffer or be sad again, and that she needed to formulate a plan for her next steps. She leaned over the sleeping Run, softly wishing her a good sleep and adding that she would protect her. Half awake, Rin felt it was strange, thinking the director wouldn't usually say things like that. But to her own surprise, she somehow wanted to believe Miss Ciela. Rin thought hopefully that she would have a sweet dream. The next day, the director asked Rin if she was sure she felt better. She mentioned the doctor said Rin could go home, but she was still worried to death. Rin loudly and confidently declared that she was really fine. She was just worried about Rudy and wanted to return to the orphanage as soon as possible. Then, the director suggested they go outside since the carriage would arrive any minute, telling Rin to let her know if she felt even the slightest bit uncomfortable. Holding the girl's hand, she blushed slightly, thinking that holding a child's hand had become a habit from her past life. Rin must be very surprised, right? But contrary to Ciela's expectations, Rin gripped the director's hand tighter and softly said it was time to go, leaving the director somewhat overwhelmed. The coachman hurried over and politely invited them to board. The director turned to Rin and smiled, letting her get in. On the way, the director showed Rin the bag and explained that it was full of medicine. She rattled off the list of items inside: fever reducers, stomach medicine, and some disinfectant supplies. Ciela made Rin promise that from now on, if she felt unwell, she must tell her. She told herself firmly that she must do everything to ensure what happened yesterday didn't happen again. But she was annoyed to realize that currently, all she knew were the children's ages. Run and Clone were 10, Rudy was 7, and Jack was 14. In the book, these four were the main characters of the orphanage. Then her thoughts turned to that short-haired girl, and the female lead asked herself in confusion, who is this child? Just then, Rin stammered that she didn't know if the director would be angry about what she was going to say next, but she felt the director had changed. She added that the old director wouldn't have taken her to the hospital, wouldn't have bought her medicine, and certainly wouldn't have been so kind and amiable. Listening to her words, the director thought Rin must still be afraid of her, yet she had summoned the courage to speak up. The female lead confessed to Run that she wanted to change. She understood she had deeply hurt the children in the past, but she didn't know how to heal those wounds. She asked the children to please tell her if they got sick from now on. She also said she hoped they would tell her directly when they were hungry. Ciela declared that this was the kind of guardian she wanted to become. Upon arrival, the director thanked the coachman for his help, saying he had worked hard. The man replied humbly, no, it was nothing, and told them to find him again if they needed the carriage. Then, the coachman added with some embarrassment that he was also very sorry. He began to gush with praise for Miss Ciela, saying he had never seen a lady as beautiful as her. He admitted that for a moment, he had lost his focus and made a mistake. She guessed he was referring to how he had stared at her when they first met. The coachman apologized profusely, saying he was truly sorry if he had offended her and begging for her forgiveness. The director said it was fine and suggested he be more careful next time. Back at the orphanage, the children gathered around in relief, and Clone shouted, "Thank goodness." The boy ran up first, anxiously asking Rin if she was okay and if it still hurt. Rin told him she had slept very well at the hospital, so it didn't hurt anymore. Then, Rudy called out happily to her sister. Ren asked if she had cried because she wasn't there, and Rudy said she hadn't. Watching all this, the director recalled their backstory. Ren and Clone were abandoned in front of the cathedral on the same day, and they had been together ever since, naturally forming a deep bond. It was Ren who had taken in Rudy when she was dying in the slums. After being separated from Clone, it was just the two of them, and Rudy protected Ren. Rudy learned swordsmanship under the guidance of a master from the cat tribe and became a gladiator. Once, Ren remembered the Ciela orphanage and tearfully apologized to Rudy. She said she was sorry for taking her from a bad situation to an even worse one. But Rudy said that as long as she was with Ren, anywhere was heaven, and told her sister to dry her tears. The director thought Ren and Rudy's bond might be even deeper than the one with Clone. Just then, Jack said thank goodness to Ren with relief, as if he had dodged a bullet. The director thought that these children being safe and sound without any adults was entirely thanks to Jack. Just then, Jack told Clone to stay away from Ren because she was still recovering. Clone argued that he wasn't bothering her, but the director thought Jack was hiding intense hostility, unlike Clone who wore his emotions on his sleeve. Jack worried her more because you have to be careful of the silent ones. Knowing Jack, he would suspect her until the very last moment. That was just how he was raised. Then, the girl's thoughts drifted to the other girl, someone the book had never mentioned. Anyway, the director told Ren to go back to her room and rest, and called Jack to her office. In the office, Jack asked in surprise why it looked so much emptier than before. The director said she had put the cocoa, snacks, and everything else in the kitchen, so he could go get them whenever he wanted to eat. Then she had Jack taste the cocoa and asked if he liked it. Jack replied that he thought Rudy would like it very much. So the director asked him to make it for the children, explaining that if she made it, they wouldn't be able to relax and enjoy it. Afterward, Jack asked her directly what she had called him for. The director began to explain that she had recently realized she knew nothing about the people living in the orphanage. She admitted she had been too distant from them all this time and had caused them a lot of pain. Ciela said she didn't think her efforts would miraculously heal those wounds, but she still wanted to build a better future. The girl clarified that, at the very least, she wanted to make this place something they could consider a safe haven. She asked Jack if he could give her a chance. After making her request, the director felt she had said everything she could. If Jack backed out now, she would have to start from scratch, knowing nothing about the children. Jack said frankly that he didn't think the director had really changed, but he didn't want to give up on the hope that the children could be happy. Listening to his words, the director thought sadly that Jack always put his own wishes and worries aside for the happiness of others. She also painfully realized that he was a child who could never truly grow up. Jack agreed to help, saying he would write everything he knew about the children in a notebook and give it to her. The director thought hopefully that perhaps she could change not only her own future, but his as well. She pointed to the bags, saying there were clothes and other things inside, and told him to distribute them to the other children. Left alone, the director thought wearily about how exhausted she was. The girl wondered when she had last eaten and how long she had been running around. She had been up all night taking care of Ron, and she still needed to inspect the orphanage for repairs and unpack and organize all the bags. The girl thought she would just take a nap, just for a few minutes, but woke up with a start. She thought, what time is it? Then she remembered she had come back around lunchtime. A wave of fear hit her as she blurted out, "No way. Did I sleep the whole day?" She noticed the blanket on her and was surprised to find it was Ren's. She was both touched and surprised, wondering when that child had covered her with it. She glanced out the window and thought, who is that guy standing outside the gate? Suddenly, loud shouting erupted outside. A man was screaming desperately, demanding they open the gate, yelling that he wanted to see the director while hurling insults at the children. Jack calmly told him that without the director's permission, they couldn't open the gate. This made the stranger even angrier. He started shouting threats and demanding if they knew who he was. Just then, the director appeared, asking, "What on earth is going on?" Ciela draped a blanket over Ren's shoulders, telling her she needed to rest well and stay warm because she hadn't fully recovered. The girl also noticed that the children had changed into their new clothes and looked much cuter than she had imagined. Seeing the director, the guys started yelling, accusing her of being rude and saying she couldn't treat him like that. The director looked him up and down, judging from his crest that he was a noble, and wondered what he was doing at the orphanage. The noble ordered Ciela to let him in immediately, saying he would deal with these rude brats first. Just then, Jack shouted to Clone, suggesting they get out of there. He said the director would open the door soon anyway, but the director flatly refused the noble. The guy was both shocked and furious, asking her to repeat herself. The director simply told him coldly that he had heard correctly. The children watched all this happen, whispering amongst themselves. One of them even doubted if that was really their director. Meanwhile, the rich man was still shouting uncontrollably, saying the director shouldn't do that, and demanding she remember how much the orphanage owed him. Listening to his words, the director understood why he was so arrogant. He was here to collect a debt. She also noticed the children weren't even scared, which meant he had been here before, always shouting and trying to intimidate them. Ciela turned to Jack and told him to take all the children inside, saying they could have some snacks but must stay indoors. Jack looked a bit uneasy, but he quickly led the children away. Left alone with the rich man, the director politely but firmly asked him to try to understand her position. The girl said she still couldn't let someone who looked so threatening inside. The noble shouted, "This is outrageous." The director thought that if Ciela really owed him money, making a scene wouldn't help. The female lead let the grumpy, arrogant noble in and invited him to her office. They exchanged scornful looks, and the uninvited guest asked if Miss Ciela wasn't going to serve him a cup of tea. The female lead asked him back why she should serve him tea. The man claimed the director owed him 1,000 gold coins. It turned out this man was Baron Clark. The director thought to herself that she had always wondered how Ciela could afford so many luxury goods. Without support from the Empire, the answer was now clear. It was usury with exorbitantly high interest. She realized with horror that 1,000 gold coins was a huge sum, but something seemed off. The female lead wondered why he would lend her such a large amount, and why he trusted Ciela so much. Seeing her silence, the Baron sneered that he knew she would deny it, and shoved the contract in her face. The director read the terms. Ciela Payrant borrowed 1,000 gold coins for Baron Clark. If the debt was not repaid by September 5th, 767, she would have to satisfy one of the Baron's requests. The contract was signed and sealed by both parties, a completely legal loan agreement. It was then that the female lead realized he never expected Ciela to repay the debt. He was after something else. The Baron demanded to know what she had to say now. The director quickly calculated in her head. After selling her dresses and jewelry and buying daily necessities, she had 1108 gold coins left. If she repaid the debt, that she would only have 108 gold coins left. That amount wouldn't even cover repairs, let alone living expenses for the next few months. The Baron said she didn't need to worry. She didn't have to repay the debt. He began to explain that, you see, he had no heir, and at his age, he was completely alone. The guy admitted he wanted to pass his title down to his child someday. So he came up with a plan. He wanted to adopt a child. After speaking, the Baron asked the director if she understood what he meant. That night, the female lead carefully considered the Baron's words, wondering if something similar had happened in the original story. Meanwhile, she began to study the notebook Jack had left. It contained brief introductions of the children. Clone, 10 years old, cheerful and proud personality. Favorite person is Run. Favorite food is oatmeal. Run, 10 years old. She is Clone's best friend and older sister. Rudy adores her. Her favorite food is oatmeal. Reading about their favorite food, the female lead was surprised. Oatmeal wasn't exactly something children would typically like. Little Rudy, 7 years old. She is the youngest but very precocious, rarely cries, sometimes fights with Clone for Ren's attention. Her favorite food is soup. Jack, 14 years old. He is the oldest. The female lead noticed that introducing himself in just one sentence was very much Jack's style. Then she saw the last entry, which was about an unknown child who delivered food to the director's room. That was 10-year-old Eddie, a new girl at the orphanage. The girl breathed a sigh of relief, feeling that things were starting to make sense. But she wondered why the book didn't even mention Eddie. In Ren's memories, there was a sentence saying Eddie was adopted by a Baron's family. Just then, someone knocked timidly on the door and called out, "Director." It was Eddie, asking softly if she could come in. The director invited her in and handed her some cocoa. Eddie thanked her, saying it tasted even better than Jack's. The director asked her what was wrong and was curious why the girl had come to the director's office so late. Eddie stammered and admitted that she had actually overheard the conversation between the director and the Baron. She specifically emphasized that she hadn't meant to eavesdrop. Then she said she heard the Baron wanted to adopt a child, and that a girl would be okay. The girl grew more and more agitated, trembling all over, and stammered that this was why she wanted to say something. The director calmed Eddie down, saying it was all right, and asked if she meant she wanted to join the Baron's family. Eddie began to apologize, saying that someone like her daring to make such a suggestion. The director began to explain that if she were adopted by a noble family, at least Eddie would be able to live a comfortable life. Hearing this, a silent question froze on Eddie's face, hope flickering in her eyes, but the director harbored doubts about the Baron Clark family. She assured Eddie she had nothing to worry about, and that it wasn't because she was lacking in any way. Ciela said she simply couldn't send her or anyone else away. Eddie asked in confusion why the director didn't want them to leave. The director said that if Eddie really wanted to move to another place, and it was a good place, she would let her go. The girl added firmly that if the place wasn't good, she wouldn't agree no matter what. Ciela explained that Eddie and the other children were the people she was supposed to protect. Then she gently told Eddie to go to sleep, and the girl asked if it was really impossible. Eddie wanted to say something more, but stopped abruptly, apologizing for disturbing Miss Ciela so late as she left, clearly hesitant to speak. The girl quickly ran out of the office. Left alone, the female lead thought sadly that seeing Eddie so upset broke her heart. She remembered a scene in the original story where the adult remorsefully recalled her childhood. The book said Eddie was adopted by a Baron's family, and then it said terrible news soon followed. It turned out Eddie had died due to the Baron's unspeakable acts. The memory ended with Ren wondering what would have happened if the children at the orphanage had paid more attention back then. With a heavy heart, the director asked herself how she could possibly send Eddie away. Knowing all this, she analyzed the Baron's words. He spoke convincingly about his lonely old age and lack of an heir, but then he added a condition. It absolutely had to be a girl. She sadly realized that in the original story, Eddie must have begged to be adopted just like she did now. The original Ciela, unable to repay the debt, had sent the girl away without hesitation. Shortly after being adopted, Eddie was found dead, though the children at the orphanage only learned of it much later. The reason Eddie was so desperate to be adopted wasn't to climb the social ladder. It was entirely because of the feeling of being excluded from the other children. Eddie had arrived at the orphanage not long ago and couldn't fit in with the children who had been living there for years. The other children were completely unaware, focused only on survival. The female lead had to admit she understood why Eddie was upset by her words. But knowing the inside story, she couldn't just send her to death. The girl thought hopefully that it wasn't too late. Eddie just needed a chance to bond with the other children. The next morning, the Baron came again and asked the director if she had chosen a child. He declared that he liked the pink-haired girl, adding that the youngest one would do as well. Hearing his words, the heroine thought with fury that this piece of trash actually treated children as commodities. Instead of answering, she slammed a bag containing 1,000 gold coins onto the table. The Baron was both shocked and enraged, furious at such disrespectful behavior, and asked her what she meant by get out. The director said with icy coldness that there were no longer any obligations between them, so why should she show him any respect? She stated bluntly that she had always been the one in charge here, and it was up to her, not him, to decide how to treat guests. The Baron asked viciously where she had gotten so much money. He told her she better think clearly, warning that if she borrowed from people she shouldn't have, she would be in big trouble. Enraged at being treated this way, the Baron roared, asking how she dared speak to him like that. The director simply commented that his voice was too loud. She said if he came for the money, he should take it and leave, asking why he was still chattering on. Ciela explained calmly that, objectively speaking, their titles were on about the same level. She added that even a fallen noble is still a noble until the title is sold. Then, the heroine insisted that he leave, saying it was almost lunchtime and she still had to cook for the children. She stated firmly that there was nothing left to discuss between them, so he should leave the loan documents and get lost. Because she never wanted to see him again, she demanded he hand over the contract as well. The Baron threw the documents on the floor in disgust and left. The Baron snarled that Ciela Perrunt would regret what she did today. After the Baron finally left, the protagonist thought with pride and relief that she had paid off all the debts. Then she decided she really needed to prepare lunch for the children. Meanwhile, the eccentric clone rushed into the girl's bedroom, complaining that the director was acting very suspiciously. He confessed that Miss Ciela had just told him the children needed to wait for her to make lunch. Clone suspected she might poison the food, then answered his own question, saying that which definitely would. Jack told Clone to stop talking crazy. Clone pointed out that even so, it was too weird that she suddenly started cooking for them. Jack said the director really had changed a lot recently, buying the medicine, toys, and even clothes. Ren also chimed in, saying maybe Miss Ciela had really turned over a new leaf. The girl recalled everything she heard while pretending to sleep in the hospital, and Miss Ciela's promise to protect her. Ren felt it sounded sincere, noticing the difference in her behavior and way of speaking. Ren admitted she wanted to believe in Miss Ciela, even if just a little bit. But Clone immediately shot that down. He reminded them that this witch used to curse at Rudy just for sneezing while she stuffed her face with greasy food. The child insisted agitatedly that someone like that couldn't change overnight. Then Clone turned to Eddie, asking what she thought of all this. The girl was silent for a long time, only mumbling vaguely. Finally, Eddie stammered that Clone had a point, but Ren wasn't wrong either. This set Clone off like a powder keg, demanding to know who was right and who was wrong. He rolled his eyes, saying this shy girl was such a drag. Ren nudged him gently with her elbow, telling him to stop talking nonsense. Eddie pointed out that compared to before, things had changed. The director no longer lost her temper or got physical at the drop of a hat. But the biggest question was whether Miss Ciela had truly changed like Ren said. Eddie remembered that the director used to speak to them as if they were a nuisance, but lately she had been very kind. Eddie concluded that she thought Ren was right. She clarified that she couldn't be 100% sure, but she really thought the director had changed. Then Eddie started stammering again, vaguely apologizing to Clone. Clone asked why she was apologizing when she had just stated her opinion. He told her not to overthink it and not to get nervous over small things, because her cowering like that made it look like he was bullying her. Then Ren asked if he really never bullied anyone, and Clone asked in surprise what on earth she was talking about. Ren laughed, saying she was just joking. Meanwhile, the heroine was making lunch for the children. The director tasted the dish she made and thought it was good. She announced that the food was ready and told everyone to come eat. Hearing this, the children were stunned, unable to believe Miss Ciela was actually cooking. Clone ordered that they had to check if she had added anything else to the food. Jack said they had to hurry downstairs. Ren suggested Eddie come with her, and feeling the warmth of the pink-haired girl's palm, Eddie agreed. When they walked in, the director told them to come in and said the children could enjoy a full meal today, telling them to take their seats. Rudy whispered that it smelled so good. Clone asked in surprise what a full meal actually meant for children. Okay, the director began to announce the lunch plan. Clone and Rudy had meatloaf and soup. Ren and Eddie had fried rice, and Jack had a portion of almarishi. It smelled amazing. The children couldn't believe they could actually eat something like this. They whispered among themselves that this kind of food was usually only eaten by the super rich, the people of high society. The director thought to herself that she didn't want their lives to be dictated by social class, power, or fat bank accounts. She wanted them to be able to enjoy a good meal or appreciate beautiful things. That was the kind of people she wanted to help them become. She noticed the children had probably never used knives and forks. They were all looking at her instead of eating, and they were worried about whether the food was safe. Then the heroine said she forgot something and announced she was going to the director's office, actually sneaking away too. She hoped they could eat in peace. As she left, she noted with a touch of disappointment that the first attempt always fails. She decided that since things were like this, she would cook for them often so the food wouldn't seem so strange. The girl planned to make more varied and special dishes, but she regretfully remembered she was broke. She thought sadly that she never imagined she would lose 1,000 gold coins in an instant due to debt. She estimated she only had a pitiful 108 gold coins left. Even if she fixed everything in the orphanage herself, she still needed materials. She calculated that materials alone would cost 3 gold coins, not counting living expenses. Adding the children's education and food costs, this money would last 6 months at most. The heroine realized cruelly that even if they survived, life wouldn't be smooth sailing but more like a miserable, destitute existence. The protagonist admitted she desperately needed some support. The original Ciela had messed things up. Royal support had been cut off long ago. The heroine noted sadly that even a small amount of help from anyone would be a godsend. Otherwise, the orphanage would soon fall apart. So she decided she needed to find a stable and reliable source of funding. The girl remembered she had someone in mind because, according to the original story, this person eventually adopted Clone. He was the one who would one day make this boy the emperor. The heroine decided to take a gamble. She knew the risk was huge, and if the plan failed, she might pay with her life. But if everything went well, he would be the strongest backing anyone could hope for. So that man, the potential patron of the orphanage, read the protagonist's letter. He specifically remarked that the girl had guts. Then he ordered his right-hand man to investigate everything about Ciela Perunt and bring her to him. Shortly after, a magnificent carriage stopped at the orphanage gate, and Miss Ciela was racking her brains over what to make for dinner. The stranger introduced himself as Rick Henneman, assistant to Lord Duke Cramen. He announced he was there to deliver the Lord Duke's reply to her. The director was surprised, thinking she had only sent the letter yesterday and didn't expect him to send a reply so quickly. She also guessed he was guarding against any tricks from her, as he demanded an immediate answer after she read the reply. The children were very annoyed by this messenger, but for some reason he was still there. After reading the letter, she saw that Duke Antrich Cramen wanted to speak with her personally. He requested she take the carriage he sent and come to see him immediately. Rick Henneman wanted to know what her answer was. The director said she had no reason to refuse. In fact, she admitted to herself she was hoping for this. He asked her to get in the carriage, but she told him to wait a moment. With question marks written all over Rick's face, she told him there was something she needed him to do. She asked the children if they all remembered not to go out and not to touch dangerous things. Miss Ciela announced she had made sandwiches, so the children could eat if they got hungry, adding that they shouldn't eat too much cold food or they might get stomachache. She warned them that if a stranger called at the door, they absolutely must not let him in. She was thinking of what else to say, but Clone impatiently interrupted the director, saying they already knew. Stop nagging. The heroine was surprised that the children were expressing their feelings more frankly in front of her. Did this mean they were becoming more comfortable with her? Ciela remembered the children went missing the first time she went out, so she was very worried it would happen again. The director assured the children it wouldn't take long and promised to stop by the market on the way back. She asked Clone if there was anything he wanted to eat. The boy hesitated for a long time, then mumbled something quietly and indistinctly. When I asked him to repeat it, he shouted loudly and firmly that he wanted to eat schnitzel. Then, stammering, he added that he wanted to try something called a children's set meal or something like that. The girl beamed and asked if he really liked the schnitzel she made. The boy denied it vehemently, insisting it wasn't like that at all. It was just that he had never eaten food like that before. He swore it had nothing to do with the taste, purely curiosity. But the heroine thought he was super cute. Then the girl asked the other children the same question one by one. Rudy shouted excitedly that she wanted to eat what Jack had. Miss Ciela pointed out she meant Almerici and wondered what Ren and Eddie wanted to try. Eddie panicked completely and couldn't speak. At this point, Ren jumped in to help her out, suggesting they eat fried rice together again. Eddie asked hopefully if they really could. They told her of course, and asked if she wanted anything else. Eddie stammered a bit, saying no thanks. She just really liked that fried rice. The heroine had thought Eddie and the other children would need some help to get close to each other. She wondered when they had become so close, but life at the orphanage was getting a bit easier. But seeing things change so fast, it seemed she had underestimated the children. Clone was asking Ron if the fried rice was good. Then the child announced he wanted to try fried rice next time. And the protagonist's thoughts turned to Jack. He was standing a little apart from the others, looking worried ever since the Duke's carriage arrived. He probably thought the Cramen family had something to do with that whole affair. Then Miss Ciela called out to him, telling him not to worry and promising that no matter what happened, she would protect him. She thought to herself that she understood these words must be unexpected for the child, but that was exactly what she wanted to say to calm him down. Then Miss Ciela asked Jack what he wanted to eat. He was silent for a moment, then answered shyly and quietly, Almerici. Ciela said okay and promised to make it when she got back. So Miss Ciela asked him to look after the others while she was away. All right, the carriage arrived at the destination. The girl stepped out of the carriage and was stunned by the sight before her. The garden was so large the end couldn't be seen, and it was beautifully designed. The estate was grand and secluded, looking like an ancient castle. Rick asked Ciela to follow him, indicating he would escort her to meet the master. The protagonist thought she was finally going to meet him. She chose the Duke as a patron, not just because his family was the only one daring enough to oppose the royal family, nor just because he would make Clone the new emperor. Ciela thought there was no harm in getting on his good side early, because if anything happened, as long as they maintained a friendly relationship, he could protect their orphanage. The girl calculated she would use information from the original story to win his favor. The servant announced to his master that he had brought Sela Perunt from the Sylvia orphanage. Standing before her was Duke Dietrich Kramen, known as the coldest and most handsome man in the Empire. She thought to herself, is it legal for a supporting character, not the protagonist, to be this handsome? He didn't look like the kind of person who would slaughter enemies on the battlefield. The Duke spoke up, saying he was curious who had the guts to send him such a letter, and commented that she looked much more ordinary than he expected. She reflected that he himself looked quite extraordinary, with amazing hair and an otherworldly voice. The heroine then asked if he was disappointed, because she didn't meet his expectations. Dietrich ignored her question, asked her to sit, and suggested they talk. The heroine's eyes met the Duke's, and she wondered in surprise. What is this? Some kind of psychological warfare? She remembered all the characters she had dealt with in her past life. This kind of scene didn't scare her. The Duke asked her what exactly she meant by the words in her letter. He read a passage from the letter, claiming she knew the solution to his most troubling problem, and stating that if he wanted to know, he could reply. He demanded she tell him what was troubling him most right now, how to solve it, and most importantly, how on earth she knew. The heroine stated that before giving the answer, she had a condition. To the Duke asking what the condition was, she requested him to become the patron of their orphanage. Dietrich asked suspiciously if she really staged all this just to get sponsorship money. She explained that for him, it was just pocket change, but for the children in the orphanage, it was a matter of life and death. Without that money, the children would starve and wouldn't get medical treatment when needed. She added with tears in her eyes that she herself had once been one of those children. Seeing her so sincere, Dietrich apologized, admitting he had spoken too harshly, and decided to rephrase his question. He asked why she specifically sought help from him when she could have gone to the emperor or other nobles. She replied that it was because he, the Duke, was the strongest and most just person she knew. The Lord Duke wanted to know why she thought that. The heroine replied she just had a feeling, adding that she might not look like it, but she was a good judge of character. Meanwhile, she thought to herself that she couldn't exactly admit she read it in a book. The Duke asked suspiciously if she was playing him. She immediately retorted that it was impossible, as she had risked everything to come here. So he finally agreed to listen, telling her to state the problem that was troubling him. She began to explain that the problem lay entirely in maritime trade. The protagonist flashed back to a scene in the book where the Duke called Clone. He told his son that the royal family had taken complete control of the seas. Therefore, the maritime trade that sustained their family's livelihood had become an utter nightmare. He added that if they had secured the trade routes beforehand, things wouldn't have become this bad. Ciela clarified confidently that they were talking about maritime trade with the Western Kingdom. For a long time, the Duke Kramen family and the royal family had maintained a mutually beneficial relationship. The Duke's family became the sword of the royal family, and in return, the royal family protected them. But this perfect relationship was broken by the current emperor, who killed his own brother to usurp the throne. The royal family and the Duke Kramen family began to oppose each other. The Western Kingdom, long shrouded in mystery due to its isolationist policy, finally opened its doors. The royal family and the Duke Kramen family, already deeply involved in trade, immediately seized the opportunity to establish contact with Weston. However, the heroine pointed out a major obstacle. The waters near the Western Kingdom were rampant with pirates. They couldn't rashly pick a fight in foreign waters, nor could they ignore the whirlpools surrounding the kingdom's coast. Most importantly, the Western Kingdom announced they would only trade with one partner. Therefore, the royal family and the Duke Crayman family, locked in a silent battle, were both scrambling to find a safe maritime trade route. She thought with satisfaction that it was just a hunch, but it seemed she guessed right. The Duke admitted she had pinpointed the problem accurately and asked if she had a solution to the Western Kingdom trade issue. The girl asked for a map and a pen, then pointed out he hadn't answered her question yet, asking again if he was willing to sponsor their orphanage. Dietrich asked what gave her the nerve to act so recklessly. He wondered if she thought he was trying to extract information from her. She thought to herself that she had already died once, so she was willing to bet her life where there was a chance of winning. She was sure he had investigated her and knew she was nobody special, but even so, Ciela added that she believed the Lord Duke wouldn't resort to such methods. The girl emphasized that if she gave something, she needed to get something in return, and asked what he thought about that. The Duke commented that she acted as if she knew him well. Rick felt the whole situation was messed up. He thought if Miss Ciela had heard the rumors about Duke Crayman, the guy everyone was afraid of, she would definitely be trembling with fear. People called the Lord Duke the cold-blooded king of the battlefield, showing no mercy to enemies. He was respected, certainly, but also feared. People whispered privately that he might one day turn his sword against his own people. They called him an icy monster who never shed a tear. The Duke was sure she must have heard all this nonsense, but the heroine countered that she knew the Lord Duke wasn't the monster from the rumors. Dietrich asked her what she would do if he refused her offer without hesitation. She said she would leave his estate and head straight for the royal palace. The guy realized this wasn't just a bluff. She knew the relationship between the Duke Crayman family and the royal family inside out. This just added another puzzle for him, and Dietrich wondered how much this girl actually knew. Dietrich finally agreed, but with a condition. He demanded that if the deal succeeded, she could not reveal anything about this conversation or the information she gave him. Ciela said she accepted his terms. Only then did the Duke announce he accepted her proposal. The girl was ecstatic because the orphanage would receive funding from Duke Crayman. Then she formally requested him to fund their orphanage until all the children could stand on their own feet. If the information she provided proved true, Ciela wanted his written promise of sponsorship. The girl also insisted he couldn't ask her about the source of the information, and if the information proved false, then he could do whatever he wanted. The Duke was surprised by the modesty of her request and asked if that was really all she wanted. The heroine confirmed it, adding that she didn't need the information kept secret. Besides, if 5 children could live happily, that was enough for her. Dietrich only said he understood. He thought to himself that she was going too far as a guardian and felt she was a strange woman. The Duke commented that many parents treated even their own biological children terribly. Meanwhile, the heroine was racking her brains to recall what she had read. Eternal Scars had an entire collection of world settings. Back then, she was impressed by the author's attention to detail and studied that thing for a long time. The map showed the routes of key characters, locations of important buildings, and even trade routes. She needed to recall the content and make some notes on the map. After all, she had read it carefully. After a while, Ciela said she had given him all the information she knew. The Duke studied the map, unable to believe that even pirate hotspots and coastal whirlpools were marked. Dietrich thought that if all this was true, once the Duke's business took off, even the Emperor wouldn't mess with them. The girl suggested that if the Duke didn't believe her, he could investigate the route first and hold off on funding the orphanage until then. The young man agreed and asked for the seal to be brought. They brought him the sponsorship contract stamped with the Duke Crayman seal, and Dietrich handed it to our girl. He stated this was what she wanted, and she accepted the document gratefully. Then she said she had disturbed him long enough for today, and the children were waiting for her, so she excused herself to leave. As she was leaving, the Duke declared that if the information was true, he would reward her like a savior. The girl thought proudly that being called the Duke's savior made her stand tall. Life at the orphanage went on as usual. The children played, and Miss Ciela managed everything in the institution. She was happy to see this place finally looking like a home that actually raised children. Over the past month, she had fixed everything that could be fixed, patched the ceiling, and repaired the exterior walls. She replaced the old tables and chairs, put on tablecloths, and finally replaced that broken window. Now, in her eyes, everything was perfect. She was admiring the new window when she suddenly noticed in the reflection that Clone had climbed too high on the jungle gym. Rin told Clone he was climbing too high. Eddie chimed in that it was too dangerous and asked if he was allowed to climb to the very top. Clone, who was already up there, tried to reassure everyone, saying he had a firm grip and everything was fine. But Miss Ciela said it was too dangerous and started worrying he might fall. Everyone started urging him to come down immediately, and he finally agreed, though reluctantly. The heroine thought to herself that Clone just couldn't help it. He always climbed up. Rudy admitted she also wanted to climb to the top. Miss Ciela got distracted looking for Jack, guessing he might be inside reading. Suddenly, someone screamed that the director had fallen. Everyone shouted in panic. Clone's fingers slipped and the child fell. As a result, Clone landed safely in the director's arms. The children gasped, and the heroine asked Clone if he was hurt. The boy looked completely stunned, but physically seemed fine, so everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The heroine reminded Clone that she told him not to climb so high because it was dangerous. He looked embarrassed and apologized. She noted in her mind that this was the first time Clone had apologized to her. She said it was good he wasn't hurt, but told him not to do dangerous things again, asking if he understood. He confirmed it somewhat bashfully. Then she announced that playtime was great, but it was time to eat, ordering everyone to go inside and wash their hands. She thought to herself that children this age just run around everywhere. She realized she couldn't stop them from playing just because they might get hurt. She needed to look after them. Just then, she tried to stand up and cried out in pain. But she calmed herself down, thinking that as long as Clone was fine, this injury was nothing. She decided it was best to make lunch first and put on a bandage later. Finally, the repair work inside and outside the orphanage was completed. The children gradually adapted to the new atmosphere and built affection for each other. The director mentioned that the children had also become much closer to her, although getting their relationship to this point hadn't been easy. Ciela recalled a conversation during lunch a few weeks ago. She suggested the children open up and chat. The heroine decided to speak first, saying they could talk about anything, like how she wished Clone would stop getting hurt all the time. Rudy laughed, pointing out that he always had new scrapes. Jack said he was actually quite happy with their current situation. Eddie was the one who had changed the most among the children. When it was her turn to speak, she confessed something. Because Eddie was the last to arrive at the orphanage, she felt it would be hard to fit in with everyone, but she promised to try hard to be brave and build connections with everyone little by little. Eddie begged them not to reject her. Clone suddenly shouted that they already considered Eddie family and asked if she didn't feel the same way. Eddie was moved to tears by these words and asked if it was true. Clone felt embarrassed and started begging her to stop crying. The director admitted in her heart that when Eddie suddenly burst into tears, she had no idea what to do. She realized in her mind that this entire month had been full of flashbacks like this. The news she had been waiting for finally spread throughout the Empire. She hoped they could start receiving aid next month. That morning, Duke Craymon's merchant ships arrived at the port. The newspapers were full of news about his successful trade with the Western Kingdom. People on the streets were saying that the monster Duke was not only good at war, but also skilled in business. Rumors said that at this rate, no one could stop Duke Craymon. This news indeed shocked the Emperor. His Majesty Yeoman Fries had stood out among his brothers since childhood, but because his mother was of low birth, he could never become the heir. Yet, he eventually eliminated his brothers and seized the throne. That was when his cruel and ruthless side was truly revealed. It was so terrifying that 10 years later, still no one dared to defy him. Except for the Craymon family, no one had the guts to dare oppose him. When the Emperor discovered that Duke Craymon had beaten him to the trade rights with the West, he flew into a rage. He screamed, questioning his advisors how they could just sit by and watch, not even knowing how the Duke had reached that kingdom. The Emperor asked if this was acceptable. He was furious. Did he, the Emperor of a dignified empire, have to pay to use that shipping route? His Majesty declared he could not tolerate this and demanded to know exactly how the Duke managed to open that trade route. The courtiers trembled in fear, echoing him, saying he was absolutely right. They said Duke Craymon's actions were a blatant insult to the Imperial family. The Emperor demanded an answer, asking if it was true that not a single person knew anything. The advisors noticed that the Emperor was always particularly angry when it involved Duke Craymon. The Emperor was livid, demanding they speak up quickly. They reported a rumor that it was the work of that orphanage director. The Emperor asked suspiciously how such a person could appear at the Duke's estate. They explained that although unconfirmed, this person managed to meet the Duke personally, and shortly after, the Duke sent people to open the trade route. The Emperor ordered them to investigate investigate the matter and send someone to that orphanage. The emperor scolded his advisors for always only believing what was right in front of them, and for ignoring people of low status, making the same mistake repeatedly. The advisors asked what he meant. The emperor wondered how an ordinary orphanage director could know about trade routes. But after careful consideration, he agreed that if this director had some connection with the duke, he should be monitored. Then he ordered them to summon a messenger immediately, saying he wanted to send a gift to this so-called orphanage director. Another ship was preparing to depart from the dock. Rick said worriedly that once His Excellency arrived at the estate, they would be swamped with work. The Duke told his men to handle any urgent matters he could handle himself. He added that he needed to stop by a place first. Meanwhile, our heroine was painstakingly preparing the children's meals, trying to make them look as delicious as possible. She said briskly that she just needed to add the final touches. Then she called the children to sit down, and when they saw the omelet rice, they screamed with pure excitement. They thanked her for the food, and she told them to dig in, but to eat slowly. She watched them eat, feeling warm and satisfied inside. She thought Jack might be hungry too, but he hadn't put down that book yet. After lunch, Jack was reading in his room as usual. She thought to herself that this child was always on guard, as if he might run away at any moment. The heroine realized that for the entire month, Jack was the only one she hadn't truly connected with. He didn't completely reject her, but he kept his distance. The girl asked him if he was interested in taking some formal lessons. She explained that in this world, a good education was far more valuable than he might imagine. Although they weren't rich, if it helped the children's future, it was worth a try. Jack was surprised and asked if that was really possible. He began to suspect Miss Ciela was trying to tell him something. But just then, there was a knock at the door. The girl was surprised, wondering who it could be, and hurried to greet the visitor. She told Jack they would continue this topic later. A stranger in uniform asked the girl who poked her head out if she was the director of the Sylvia Sanctuary. Sylvia Peyrut. She confirmed it, then asked who he was. When she saw the crest on his shoulder, she knew immediately who he was, without a doubt. The messenger introduced himself, saying he was there to convey His Majesty's decree. He added that she probably never imagined he would come here personally. Ciela replied that she didn't know what orders he had received, but emphasized that this was just an ordinary orphanage. He said he understood, but still wanted to go inside to talk. The girl politely refused, explaining that the children would be frightened by a nobleman in full dress uniform. The messenger sighed, clearly annoyed, but accepted it. Then he informed her that His Majesty had decided to sponsor her orphanage. The heroine was shocked. The messenger announced a special sponsorship, emphasizing that direct support from the Imperial family was extremely rare. He kept saying this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Seriously, the amount alone was more than any other patron would give. She became suspicious, asking why the emperor would suddenly decide to sponsor her orphanage. She pointed out that the orphanage didn't meet the funding criteria, yet now it was receiving special help out of nowhere. Ciela felt there must be a catch. She politely refused, saying she appreciated His Majesty's kindness, but could not accept it without knowing the reason. The messenger flew into a rage at her refusal, yelling at her to wake up and asking if she knew what she was saying. The girl thought to herself, she was just refusing a donation. Why was he being so aggressive? The messenger insisted that nothing compared to the emperor's support. The amount would be more than any other patron. He added that with this money, she could easily pay off the debt to Baron Clark. Hearing this, she became alert. She asked how he knew that, worrying that the Imperial family might have been investigating her. But this wasn't in the original story. She guessed it was because of her meeting with Duke Crayman. Despite the pressure, she firmly stated that she was very grateful for the offer, but had to refuse. She asked him to leave. Suddenly, the messenger grabbed her and asked threateningly if she really thought she could defy the emperor's order and remain unharmed. Ciela asked sarcastically if this was how the Imperial family got what they wanted, through coercion. She warned that if the messenger didn't leave, she would write to His Majesty, and explained that his behavior was rude and aggressive, leaving her no choice but to refuse the sponsorship. The messenger sneered, saying the emperor wouldn't read a letter from a fallen noble. He warned her that if she made an enemy of the emperor, no family would sponsor her. Suddenly, someone said calmly that it didn't matter. They would do just fine even without Imperial support. It turned out Duke Crayman appeared at that very moment. The messenger was stunned and began to stammer that even the Duke could not ignore His Majesty's will. The Duke pointed out, if you make an enemy of the Imperial family, no other family will sponsor you. Duke Crayman announced that his family would sponsor the orphanage. This meant the orphanage was under his protection and funding. Furthermore, he added that he would not allow anyone else to become its patron. He ordered the messenger to go back and convey these words exactly to His Majesty. As the messenger left, he shouted angrily that he would report the Duke's arrogance and disrespect to His Majesty. After the envoy left, the Duke turned to the orphanage director and apologized for being late. Ciela mentally noted his appearance. His shirt buttons were undone, and his sleeves were uneven. She guessed he had rushed here directly without even going back to the estate. The Duke noticed she was staring at him and asked why she was looking at him like that, implying there were more important things than his appearance. The girl apologized flusteredly, explaining that he appeared so suddenly she was a bit surprised. She thought he had caught her sizing him up. Then Ciela gratefully recalled that a minute ago he said he would sponsor their orphanage, so he had kept his promise. She politely invited him inside, saying that although the place was humble, she would serve him tea. Dietrich agreed happily, but added that the children were afraid of him. The heroine apologized for any discomfort this might cause him, and explained that they were afraid of nobles. As she led him through the hallway to her office, the Duke noticed how warm and cozy it was. He also commented that the lighting was good, making it a perfect place for children. She wondered what he was looking at, then realized he was staring at the ceiling. He added that it looked like she had put a lot of work into it. She embarrassedly thought of the ceiling she had patched up herself. That ceiling was held together by little more than spit and glue. She felt a wave of embarrassment and replied politely that it was an honor to hear such words from His Excellency. She opened the office door and invited him in. She groaned inwardly at the mess inside and apologized again. She said she would go prepare tea and asked him to wait a moment. She thought suspiciously that she only had tea leaves she had packed in a small bag herself, wondering if she could serve that to him. She explained to the Duke that this was a tea bag, a small cloth pouch that made brewing tea easier. The Duke asked curiously if the young lady made it herself. She confirmed it a bit flusteredly, but added that she didn't invent it, though she was the first person in this world to use them. His Excellency tasted the tea and said it was neither bitter nor too weak, just right. When the girl offered to change the tea if he didn't like it, he replied that he liked it very much. Then she offered to pack a few bags for him to take away, and he readily accepted her offer. Ciela thought he must be in a good mood because the trade agreement went well. He was even smiling. She congratulated him on successfully completing the trade with the Western Kingdom. Dietrich asked if the rumors had already spread, and the girl said the capital was buzzing with it. He replied that he didn't know because he had just returned. She thought in surprise, so he really came straight here. She asked him if he really came straight here without even returning to his own estate. The Duke pointed out that he had already said so, and if her information was correct, he would acknowledge her as his benefactor. Then he thought, wouldn't going directly to his esteemed benefactor be the best choice? The girl thought to herself, Duke Crayman, whom even the Emperor feared, actually called her his benefactor. She admitted to herself that she was so happy she could barely keep her composure. She noticed he didn't seem like the type to make empty promises. Then the Duke asked her if all she really wanted was for him to sponsor her orphanage. He inquired if the young lady had any other requests. In response, the heroine requested him not to call her young lady, but Ciela. She added that if he felt uncomfortable, calling her Parente was fine too, explaining that she just couldn't get used to the title young lady. The heroine pointed out that no one had ever even called her princess before. Seeing his reaction, she felt this might be an unreasonable request. The Duke said her name, adding that it was the first time he had called a lady by her first name, so he felt a bit awkward. The girl quickly replied that she didn't feel awkward at all. Then he said he would practice until he could say her name more naturally. She was surprised that he would practice saying her name, feeling that the Duke had suddenly become unusually gentle. Then Dietrich asked Ciela if she really had no other needs and told her to speak freely. She thought to herself, as the Duke's benefactor, how much could she ask for? Especially considering there were still some plot points in the original work that needed fixing. The heroine wondered if His Excellency could protect the children if any of them were in danger. He swore on his honor that he would protect the children of the orphanage. She began to thank him, but the Duke interrupted her, asking who would protect her then. He pointed out that her request only included the children. He reminded her that it was like this when they first met in his territory, and it was like this now. She tried to explain flusteredly that it was because the children were weaker than her, but he countered that strength didn't matter. From what he could see, he pointed out that Sylvia wasn't taking care of herself at all. She replied that she barely had time to take care of the children, asking when she was supposed to worry about herself. The Duke said, just as he had stated, if the orphanage was in danger, he would protect not only the children, but also her. Sylvia replied that she didn't understand why His Excellency cared so much about her. He explained that sponsorship meant responsibility, and since he told the Emperor's envoy that only his family would support them, he had to keep his promise. Ciela realized she had always just seen him as a supporting character, the one who supports the protagonist. But listening to him now, she understood he was much more remarkable than she had imagined. Ending the conversation, she told him she was counting on him from now on. Later that night, she was reflecting on the conversation with the Duke, especially his words about supporting her no matter what. She breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she was always the one protecting others, never the one being protected. She noticed that talking to the Duke made her heart beat strangely fast. She wondered if she would feel this way every time they met, but then she returned to reality, reminding herself that they were just patron and director and they probably wouldn't meet often. She walked outside, completely captivated by the night sky. Just then, Jack walked towards her. She was surprised to see the child, wrapped him up tight, and asked why he wasn't asleep yet, especially in such cold weather. Jack explained that he saw her come out and wanted to talk to her. They sat down on a bench. The director suggested he go inside, but he refused, saying it felt stuffy inside and he preferred to talk out here. Then Jack reminded her that she had asked him earlier if he wanted to continue his studies. Miss Ciela pointed out with concern that he was sitting too close to the edge, and he confirmed that he wanted to study. But he doubted if it was really possible for someone like him. She told Jack that if he wanted to learn, he should, but the boy said he heard it was expensive. He asked who would take care of the children if he went to school, because he thought as the oldest, he should look after them, and neglecting them for his own wishes made him feel selfish. Jack admitted he was very disappointed in himself and started to complain. Ciela felt he was just like her in her past life, another child who gave up on dreams and opportunities. She had walked that path herself, but she couldn't let Jack bear that burden at such a young age. She wondered what she could do to help him. She fell into thought, not knowing what to say, whether to comfort him or tell him he was already doing well. Finally, she decided to tell Jack the words she desperately wished she could have heard from someone when she was in a situation. She told him he was just Jack, and he didn't need to worry about so many things. She admitted that because of her shortcomings, he had been forced to take care of everyone, but she promised it wouldn't happen again and urged him to do what he wanted to do, to study if he wanted to study. Ciela vowed to take responsibility for everything and protect everyone in the orphanage so that he could just be a 14-year-old child. The director suggested they talk about his studies tomorrow after a good night's sleep. He agreed and thanked her. So Jack left first. Knowing him, she guessed he would regret showing his emotions and would start avoiding her again. Ciela hoped this wouldn't distance them. The director was lost in thought and didn't even notice Clone at first. She asked him somewhat impatiently why he wasn't asleep yet. Clone stammered, asking if she was hurt because of him, and handed her a bandage. The girl was surprised how the child knew she was hurt, as she had tried her best to hide it. When Clone added hesitantly that if she didn't need it, just say so. She quickly assured the boy that she did need it and thanked him, as he had never cared before she was hurt. Meanwhile, a messenger reported that Duke Crayman had announced the Crayman family would be the sole sponsor of the Sylvia orphanage. The unlucky subordinate had almost accepted that he was dead meat. The Emperor sneered, certain that there was something going on between the orphanage director and the Duke. Then His Majesty said he was ready to issue another order. The subordinate perked up, promising not to fail him again. A while later, the Emperor arrived at his study, where his private secretary was already waiting. Yeoman asked if they had found that child. The secretary replied that they hadn't found them yet. Next, the furious Emperor smashed an inkwell against the assistant's head. Then he sighed with indignation and annoyance, declaring that he hated utter incompetence. The subordinate hurriedly assured him that he would do everything possible to find them as soon as possible. The Emperor Emperor rudely ordered him to get out. Alone, the Emperor pondered that just as he had done, others could also cut off his head and seize the throne. This was exactly why he had eliminated everyone with a claim to the throne. The Emperor worried that he still had two unresolved troubles, Duke Crayman and that child. He cursed his dead brother in his heart, wondering where he had hidden that brat. Then he pulled himself together, declaring that no matter where that child was hiding, even in the deepest pit, he would find him and end this. Ciela was excited because the first sponsorship payment arrived today and decided to rush to the bank. But her worry was correct. Jack was cold to her. He was engrossed in his book, completely ignoring the director. Ren and Rudy wished her luck and told her to be careful. She promised and assured them she would be back soon. Although she was frustrated, she told herself that at least he was quite honest that night. He shared what was bothering him, so she wasn't completely disappointed. Suddenly, someone called out to the director. Ciela turned around and saw Jack. He urged her to take care of herself and made sure she would definitely come back. The heroine was moved by the boy's words and promised she would fulfill all his requests. The Duke asked his assistant if the sponsorship money had been transferred. Rick confirmed it, but mumbled something about the amount. Dietrich interrupted him, asking if it wasn't enough. The heroine was stunned and repeated, "How much did he say?" The bank clerk had to repeat that the Crayman family had sent 1,000 gold coins for the Sylvia orphanage. The girl was still shocked by the amount, remembering the Duke had mentioned monthly payments. She wondered if he had sent the whole year's worth at once, but then felt it might be a mistake. The heroine started calculating. If he sent 1,000 gold coins every month, that would be 12,000 gold coins a year. She thought maybe this was the Duke's first donation, and he didn't know the appropriate amount. Or for the richest man in the entire empire, 1,000 gold coins was just pocket money. So Ciela decided she had to go see him. When the carriage stopped at the orphanage, Ciela told the coachman to take her somewhere else instead, and he readily agreed. She thanked him and said she was just going to grab something and would be right back. Suddenly, someone called out to the director. She turned and saw the Emperor's messenger rushing toward her. She got worried, but the man shouted excitedly that he was so glad she was finally back. The girl wondered, why was this messenger here again? Was it for that special favor thing again? She had already flatly refused last time. The messenger quickly reassured her that he was just here to deliver a letter from the Emperor. The young man promised he would leave immediately once she accepted the letter. Ciela took the letter from the royal messenger in surprise, and the messenger left just as he said he would. Back inside, she started to worry, wondering where the children were. They might be hiding because of that fancy dress guy. She felt she needed to hire someone to guard the orphanage every time she left. She was afraid something might happen to the children. She decided it had to be someone she could trust completely. But the only people she really knew were characters from the novel. She realized that was it. She needed someone reliable, someone who could protect this place. Meanwhile, Ciela walked upstairs and heard some noises coming from the children's bedroom. It sounded like a lesson or something. Clone was arguing that 1 + 1 is equal to 1, but Jack was correcting him. Rin got those problems right, and Jack praised her for doing a great job. Meanwhile, Rudy was curled up asleep on the floor, and Miss Ciela thought it was just too cute. Then Jack asked Eddie to try those problems. Eddie hesitated a bit, saying the questions looked hard, but she would try her best. Watching this scene, the heroine thought how excellent and lovely Eddie was. The girls simply couldn't believe Jack was teaching the children. It totally touched her. She thought he must really believe education was super important. Ciela silently promised Jack that she would do everything to ensure he could study properly. She couldn't send him to those expensive academies for rich kids, but she could definitely hire a tutor for him. But first, the heroine decided she needed to resolve this whole donation situation. Her hands were still shaking at the thought of 1,000 gold coins. After grabbing everything she wanted, Ciela walked to the carriage and told him it was time to go. The coachman saw her and asked where to go next. She told him to take her to Duke Crayman's estate, which shocked him. A while later, the coachman announced they had arrived at Duke Crayman's estate. He asked worriedly if she was really going in. He started trying to talk her out of it, saying she might not know anything about the Duke. But he was a cruel and warlike guy and, not quite right in the head. So it would be much better for her to return to the orphanage. Ciela replied calmly that if he didn't know the full story, he shouldn't speak carelessly. She told the coachman she had heard similar rumors, but hearing them with her own ears only made her angry. The heroine began to defend the Duke, saying the Duke she knew was a man who kept his promises. She said he always respected her, and he was much more decent and kind than anyone imagined. As she approached the gate, a guard asked her what her business was here. The heroine replied firmly that she was here to see His Excellency. The guard asked if she had an appointment. She admitted she didn't, but asked them to tell the Duke that Silvia Parente was here to fulfill her promise. The girl assured them the Duke would understand. The guards huddled together to discuss it and told her to wait. Ciela breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she had succeeded. The protagonist asked the trembling coachman if he was afraid, and he admitted he was terrified. He added that he couldn't leave a lady here alone. Ciela smiled and reassured him that nothing bad would happen. The girl insisted he shouldn't worry so much. Duke Crayman wasn't as scary as the rumors said. The coachman asked in surprise if she knew the Duke well. She replied modestly that she knew him a little, as they had met a few times. Then the coachman asked if the lady was of noble birth. Ciela replied no. She wasn't even a border noble. The girl added that she was a fallen noble, no different from a commoner. Suddenly, the sound of hooves and a creaking gate could be heard. The heroine guessed the night must have returned. To her surprise, the Duke himself came out to greet her, calling her by name. She shyly greeted him using his title. The Duke said he heard she wanted to see him, so he came to pick her up personally. Everyone was shocked by Lord Duke's action. She thanked him, admitting inwardly that seeing the Duke reminded her of his promise to protect her. The girl apologized for coming uninvited, explaining she wanted to give him something and talk. Dietrich reassured her it was fine, and she could do anything, which left Ciela stunned, asking him what he meant. The Duke told Ciela that she was his person, so she could come anytime. Flustered, she thanked him. His Excellency invited her inside, and the girl agreed. But she said she would take the carriage afterward. The Duke was surprised and asked if she intended to take a carriage to the manor, to which Ciela affirmed. Then, Dietrich said his horse was faster than a carriage. She countered that she couldn't ride very well and had even hired a carriage. The coachman shouted for her not to worry about a thing. The girl also mentioned she brought a small gift as a thank you, and Dietrich offered to carry it for her. Dietrich said if Ciela didn't know how to mount a horse, he could give her a hand. He hopped onto the horse first. Then he reached out and pulled her up. She apologized for being a burden. He reassured her that she wouldn't fall and told her not to be afraid, just to lean back against him. Ciela thought to herself that this was much more comfortable than she expected, wondering if he was being so careful with the horse because of her. She also thought that with them being so close, she could hear his heartbeat, or perhaps it was just her own heart beating wildly. The heroine noticed the Duke's manor was surrounded by a lush green forest, making a mental note of it. She didn't have time to look around during her first visit, but looking at it now, the forest seemed vast and endless. The Duke asked the heroine if her injured ankle was better. He explained that he noticed it was swollen when he saw her at the orphanage last time. Ciela replied that it had fully healed and she was fine, thanking him for his concern. The girl thought to herself that among the children, only Clone had noticed her injury, but the Duke had seen it too. When the orphanage closed down and Clone was separated from the other children, he wandered into this forest and met Duke Crayman. Ciela remembered that after that encounter, the Duke adopted Clone and they became a family. However, she noted that because of her, the plot had changed, and Ciela's orphanage would never go bankrupt. On one hand, the heroine regretfully thought that the bond between Duke Crayman and Clone that was gone, but on the other hand, the children's lives after the orphanage closed wouldn't be like in the original plot. For a moment, she thought of those she felt deeply sorry for. The Duke noticed her contemplation and asked what was wrong. She simply said briefly that everything was fine. Back at the mansion, she felt the living room looked like a damn ballroom. But she scolded herself, telling herself now was not the time to daydream. Then she handed him the package, explaining she made a bunch of tea bags in different flavors for him. She added that she felt bad about only giving him one last time, so she made a lot more this time. The Duke smelled the gift and praised its pleasant aroma. She said the tea bags could even be used like sachets, and Dietrich asked what a sachet was. Ciela remembered that in her previous life, people used coffee or herbs to make air fresheners. So a tea bag sachet was a great idea. She asked him to try it and tell her if he liked it, promising to make more for him if he did. Then she said there was something she wanted to tell him. Suddenly, Rick walked into the room, apologized, and placed a cup of tea on the table. The girl was pleasantly surprised to find that he had used one of the tea bags she made. Rick explained that the master only used it on important occasions, and today he specifically ordered it to be used. She was surprised the Duke liked the tea so much. Rick said he heard she invented the tea bags and asked if it was true. She affirmed it. He called it a groundbreaking invention. The Duke proposed that if she didn't mind, the Crayman family would invest in the project and put it into commercial production. He assured her that all rights to the tea bags would remain hers, and the contract terms would be drawn up in her favor. He added that the details would be specified in the contract, and of course, the girl could refuse, although in Dietrich's opinion, it was quite a good deal. The heroine was stunned, thinking to herself that she had actually received a formal investment offer. She asked for some time to consider it carefully, and Dietrich agreed. The heroine thought, "I didn't come here for this." Then she turned to the Duke and said there was something she needed to tell him. Dietrich asked what it was. Ciela declared that the sponsorship amount was too high. She admitted to herself that talking about money always made her sweat nervously. The Duke asked Rick if it was true he promised to sponsor 1,000 gold coins, and his subordinate confirmed it. Ciela exclaimed again that it was too much, and the Duke looked surprised. He replied that after discussing with Rick, the amount had already been significantly reduced, asking back, "What do you mean it's too much?" She thought that when it came to money, she and this guy were on completely different wavelengths. After all, he was born a duke. Then she explained that she had agreed to 50 gold coins because that was about the amount nobles usually donated. The Duke stated bluntly that he wouldn't donate the same amount as ordinary nobles, and he hadn't said exactly 50 gold coins, but about that amount. Dietrich said he understood the girl's surprise, but he explained that he wanted the children he sponsored to live better than others, adding that this money showed his sincerity. He hoped she would accept it and not feel it was a burden. Ciela realized that coming here to complain about the sponsorship amount was a rather short-sighted move. After all, she was the director of the orphanage he was sponsoring, so she said she understood the Duke's meaning. She also admitted she had taken things out of context before and stated she would gratefully accept his donation. With the sponsorship matter settled, Lord Duke confessed there was something he wanted to know. So, the Duke asked the heroine if she had received an invitation to the Imperial anniversary banquet. Surprise froze on the heroine's face, and he asked again, had she not received an invitation? The girl realized the invitation the Duke showed was identical to the one the Emperor's messenger had given her. Judging by her expression, Dietrich guessed Ciela had already received one. She was deeply confused inside, as a fallen noble would never be invited to such a banquet, and she wondered. When the Emperor had discovered her involvement with Duke Crayman, she guessed perhaps it started from the moment he sent the first letter. The Duke called her by name, saying he was worried something might happen to her because of him. He admitted he didn't want Ciela to attend the banquet, but pointed out that refusing would be tantamount to defying the Emperor. To ensure her safety, he proposed entering the palace together with her, but warned her not to do anything that would attract attention. Furthermore, Dietrich offered to send a carriage and guards, asking her not to refuse and to please accept. She was genuinely surprised he would send a carriage for her, as she thought she'd have to hire one herself. She smiled and thanked the Duke for his thoughtfulness, saying she would gladly accept his help. He smiled back and agreed it was a good idea. As the meeting ended, the heroine thanked the Duke, and he replied that he looked forward to seeing her at the banquet. The heroine also thanked Mr. Hanamine for his interest in the tea bags. He suggested she just call him Rick. Meanwhile, Point two gossiping guards were talking about Lord Duke calling the lady by her first name. The heroine said she should get going, citing that it was dinner time and she was worried about the children. The Duke saw his guest off and returned to his study to continue reading. Rick asked the boss why he cared so much about her, admitting the lady had helped them greatly in trade. But in his opinion, the boss's attention went far beyond that. Dietrich confirmed the deal was a complete victory and the Crayman family made a fortune, but in return, they had to donate for 10 consecutive years. Plus, the amount was ridiculously high, investing in those damn tea bags, and the contract terms were all in the lady's favor. Then, Dietrich voiced a thought. If they had been born into normal families, Rick wouldn't have turned his back on his family. And he himself wouldn't have become a monster. Rick asked what this had to do with her. The Duke explained that they didn't have guardians who truly cared, but for those children, she could be an amazing guardian. He said he just wanted to see the children of that orphanage happy. Rick wondered if Lord Duke was really satisfied with experiencing life through others. Dietrich agreed that perhaps it was so. Rick pointed out that just being a sponsor would have been enough. Then he asked the Duke why he decided to get involved in the teabag business. Dietrich said he just really liked the taste, that was all. Of course, he didn't admit what he truly liked. The next morning, the heroine was calculating things in her mind. Mrs. Clover would sew the dress, and she also found shoes that hadn't been sold yet. The heroine pondered, asking herself if it would be okay not to wear any jewelry. But she immediately doubted herself, wondering if appearing at the banquet without any jewelry would make her stand out even more. The girl expressed that there was simply too much to prepare for the banquet. She mentioned that everyone from high society would be there and wondered if this was an invitation or a summons. Ciela even considered selling her baronetcy. That would surely be worth a lot of money, right? If she were just a commoner, she wouldn't have to go to the banquet, and Lord Duke might be able to breathe a sigh of relief too. Then it suddenly struck her that the orphanage was property under the name of Baroness Patron. So, damn it, Ciela absolutely could not sell the title, which meant she had to go to this stupid banquet. Suddenly, someone tugged at her sleeve. It was Clone. The director asked the boy if something was wrong. He asked excitedly if she was going somewhere alone again. Clone said with a hint of tears that she always left by herself and left them behind. Ciela called Clone's name regretfully, but the child corrected her, saying it wasn't just about him. He added that all the children wanted to go out. The girl thought about it, and Clone was right. She asked herself when was the last time the children went out? The last time they went out was a month ago. The heroine realized painfully that in trying to keep them safe, she had ended up locking them in the orphanage. The girl shouted to the children, thus suggesting they have a hearty breakfast first, and then everyone would go to the market together. The children couldn't believe their luck. They were finally going out. The coachman took the children and Lady Ciela to the central market. The children pointed excitedly at the sea of people and the variety of stalls there. The heroine warned that if the children got lost, it would be an utter disaster, and suggested they hold hands and stay together. Just then, Clone's so-called mischief began. He started screaming that he didn't want to and begged to be let go. The child climbed up a tree, then asked for help to get down, and then complained that he was hurt. Clone was the only one they had to keep a close eye on, so Ciela called Rin for backup. The girl spoke firmly to Clone, reiterating her proposal to hold hands and walk together. She asked Clone if he didn't like holding hands. He denied it vehemently, saying he actually liked it very much. Miss Ciela pointed out that Rudy was too small and suggested Eddie and Jack look after her. The girl asked Eddie if she would be willing to hold Rudy's hand. The girl expressed doubt, pointing out that Rudy seemed to prefer Rin. After gathering her courage, Eddie timidly asked Rudy if she would hold her big sister's hand. To Eddie's surprise, Rudy agreed completely. Miss Ciela suggested they go explore the market. They started browsing the stalls, and at first, everything was calm. But before long, the heroine was chasing Clone all over the market as he ran from one stall to another, extremely excited. He wanted to touch everything and see everything. The heroine breathed a sigh of relief when she found a toy shop. She announced that everyone could pick a toy they wanted. The children asked if she was serious with disbelief and joy. Clone grabbed a toy almost immediately, saying he just wanted that ball, and that was it. Then the heroine asked Ren if she really wanted a needle and thread as her toy. She gently suggested she might look at something else. Just then, Jack announced that he, Eddie, and Rudy had also made their choices. The heroine was a bit surprised and asked Rudy if she really liked swords that much. Ciela clearly remembered that in the original story, Rudy became a gladiator, but the child just picked a sword as a toy now, right? Rudy replied that it was because she wanted to protect everyone. The girl began to list the people she wanted to protect one by one: Sister Rin and Sister Eddie, Brother Clone, and Brother Jack. Suddenly, Rudy announced seriously that she would also protect the director. The heroine was flattered and said she would also protect all the children in her orphanage. Suddenly, Clone turned to his brother and pointed to the building full of books that Jack liked very much, suggesting they go take a look. Jack said they couldn't leave the toy shop without paying. The shopkeeper suggested they go to the bookstore together and she would wrap their purchases. The bookstore clerk said they didn't have many customers anyway, so the children could read as long as they wanted. Ciela thanked him. Then she happened to find a book titled Herb Guide for Aromatic Teas. She couldn't get Dietrich out of her mind, smiling and saying the tea smelled fragrant. The girl started making excuses for herself, thinking this book wasn't for the Duke. She was just interested in herbs. She thought the book might list herbs beneficial for children, so that's why she was reading it. Then, Ciela decided to put the book back, but out of the corner of her eye, she glimpsed Jack engrossed in another book. From some of the pictures, she guessed the book's content. The book was about the late Emperor and Empress, whom everyone knew had no children, but in reality, they had a secret child. The novel said that 14 years ago, just before the Second Prince's Rebellion, a child was born. The Empress used magic to change his appearance and entrusted the child to a maid. She was supposed to hide him in an unrelated place. That unknown surviving royal was Jack Fritz. In the original story, about a year later, Miss Ciela discovered the magic on the child had worn off. She went to the Emperor to report it to get a reward. But His Majesty planned to eliminate Ciela to silence her forever. Realizing this, Ciela left everything behind and fled. Afterward, soldiers stormed the orphanage, and Jack was forcibly dragged to the palace and disposed of by the Emperor himself. But that tragedy was just a story from the original timeline. With unshakable determination, the heroine swore to herself that she would never let it happen, and she would never let Jack die. Miss Ciela approached Jack and asked if he liked the book. Jack snapped the book shut and replied briefly and sharply that no, he was just looking out of curiosity. Miss Ciela told Jack that if he found a book he liked, she would buy it for him. The child just said he would choose something else. That book was about the history of the royal family and central nobility. At Mrs. Clover's fabric shop, the saleswoman politely greeted the customers. But a second later, she exclaimed in surprise and concern because she noticed these customers looked like they were on a shopping spree. The saleswoman asked the heroine if she was really going to carry everything herself, to which she replied, "I can't exactly let the children carry these bags, can I?" The saleswoman suggested she leave the packages there. Then the saleswoman asked if these were the children the customer had mentioned before. Ciela said cheerfully, "They're super cute." She added that the saleswoman would be shocked to hear how much they loved Miss Clover's clothes. The heroine mentioned they came here today, thought to buy some clothes for the children and also a dress for herself. The saleswoman asked about the dress in surprise, and Ciela explained she needed a dress to attend a high-class party. The saleswoman wasn't sure if she would like it, saying the dress was in the studio. Miss Ciela asked Jack to watch the children for a moment and walked into the studio, finding every dress absolutely gorgeous. She gasped, completely stunned by one of the dresses. Miss Clover confirmed that this was one of the ones she had sold to her before, and explained that she took it apart and modified it slightly. Ciela admitted she never realized its color was so stunning because it used to be buried under those heavy decorations. "Miss Clover, why did you hide this dress in the back instead of displaying it?" She asked that I think it's beautiful. Miss Clover blushed and admitted, "I used to have my own boutique, but it went out of business. So I guess I just stopped trusting my own judgment." Ciela interjected, "How could that be? Look at this clean finish, this incredible craftsmanship. It's obvious you are amazing." She didn't even look at the other dresses and announced, "I'll take this one. Period. I seriously doubt I can find anything better." Seeing the tailor so flustered, probably because this was her first sale in a long time, the heroine tried to comfort her. "I can see how much heart you put into your work," she said. "I am thrilled to be the one to wear this dress." By the way, the heroine added, "My name is Ciela." She thanked Ciela, even tearing up a little. Meanwhile, the children continued exploring the shop. Ren walked up to a piece of fabric that reminded her of the night sky. The children were sharing how great everything was, saying the market was incredible. Clone said in surprise that no one treated them like trash. Rudy agreed, and added that it felt like they had come to a whole new world. The girl remembered a fairy tale she saw in the bookstore where the protagonist stumbled into a strange land full of wonders. Ren agreed they felt the same way, like they had also come to some magic kingdom because their lives had completely changed. The bad people were gone, and the director started giving them new clothes and delicious food. And they could run around and shout anytime, anywhere. Suddenly, a worried Eddie came over and said she remembered the hero in the story returned to his own world. The girl asked if they also had to go back to their past lives. At this, Jack announced firmly that they wouldn't go back to how things were and swore to protect all of them. Clone eagerly supported Jack, saying he would protect everyone with him and told his younger siblings not to worry. Rin replied that she believed him. Rudy exclaimed she also believed her brother, and Eddie smiled shyly, saying she did too. Watching this scene, Jack promised himself that no matter what happened, he wanted to protect his siblings and would do anything for them. Suddenly, Ciela approached the children and asked what they were doing. Rudy ran over and said they were looking at fabric. Rin showed the director the fabric that looked like the night sky. Miss Ciela agreed that the fabric indeed looked like a starry night. Meanwhile, Jack was thinking that some things had changed now, and the director had also become one of the people he wanted to protect. The children were mesmerized by the beautiful fabric and asked to see more, admitting it was their first time seeing something so beautiful. Ciela thought they might be trying their best to memorize it all, because they didn't know when they would see such things again. Thinking that they would never have to do that again, she felt a bit sad. Jack asked the question everyone was worried about straight out. Miss Ciela, should we be afraid of going back to how things were? Before she could answer, he asked again, what exactly do we mean to you? This question really made Ciela start thinking about herself. She remembered how she suddenly became Ciela Perron, focused only on avoiding a very terrible ending. But then, her thoughts returned to the here and now. Now, she just wanted every child in her orphanage to grow up healthy and happy. She wanted to be their adult and guardian, the kind of person she needed but never had when she was a child. She confirmed that she was their guardian. This was the choice she made, and she would use everything she had to protect them. Hearing her heartfelt words, Jack said he would try to believe her and asked her to keep her promise. Ciela agreed calmly and firmly. Then she turned her attention to the other children. They tried on new clothes. Ciela said adorably how cute they looked and that every piece fit perfectly. She announced she was buying everything, and the saleswoman couldn't believe her ears. Ciela pointed to the fabric that reminded the children of the night sky, and which they liked very much. Without announcing, she would buy that piece too. Just like that, evening came. Ciela told the children the coachman would pick them up before sunset, and he would arrive soon. The children responded wearily, but obediently. Ciela noticed Rin particularly liked that fabric, and then she remembered the girl had chosen a sewing kit in the toy shop. She wondered if she was really interested in it, so she asked Rin if she had decided what to do with that fabric. Rin replied without hesitation that she wanted to make warm socks for Rudy and a pretty handkerchief for Eddie. Her sewing plans also included making knee pads for Clone, who fell often, and a bookmark for Jack. Then she added she wanted to give a sachet to the director. Ciela asked in surprise if there was one for her too. Rin explained that it was because Ciela made them delicious food every day, so she wanted to give her a gift. This sincerity deeply touched Ciela, and she wondered since when this girl had stopped avoiding her gaze. The director couldn't believe Rin had started looking at her with such trusting eyes. She admitted to herself that she didn't know how to handle all the emotions she was feeling, but she just replied calmly that she looked forward to the gift. Rudy invited the director to sit on the bench with them, but Ciela doubted there was enough space for 6 people. But the girl assured her confidently it was no problem. If they sat just right, everyone could fit. Watching everyone squeeze together, Ciela thought these kids were really clever. Then she suggested they come out to play together again another day. They could bring blankets and some food for a picnic. What did everyone think? The idea received an enthusiastic response. Rudy immediately said she wanted to go on a picnic with everyone. The other children, though shy, also began to whisper their agreement. Clone said if Rin liked the idea, then he was in too. Jack also quietly supported the suggestion, saying he also liked the idea. Seeing everyone so happy, Ciela promised firmly that they would definitely all go on a picnic together. But her final thoughts drifted back to the near future, reminding her the banquet was just around the corner. Ciela remembered the Duke's worried face, concerned she would get hurt because of him. Fortunately, nothing bad had happened so far. Just then, the coachman arrived. Back at the orphanage, preparations for the banquet were in full swing. The boys waited for the director to finish changing. Eddie shouted that everything was ready, while Clone exclaimed with a mix of annoyance and relief that they were finally done. But when he walked into the room and saw the director, Clone was stunned, saying Miss Ciela looked like an angel. Flustered by the compliment, Ciela stammered, asking if she really looked okay and if everything was all right. Rin asked Clone why he froze. It turned out the kid was sulking because the other children hadn't included him and his brother in their play. They reminded him they just asked him to wait until the director was ready. Suddenly, everyone's eyes focused on the approaching carriage. Seeing how huge and shiny it was, the children shouted in excitement, and Rudy asked the director if they were really going to take that thing to the castle. Crone interjected that the emperor would certainly be there too, along with knights carrying magnificent swords. The thought of magnificent swords and knights made the children even more excited, while Jack watched it all closely from the side. He suddenly remembered a woman begging him to listen carefully so he would know what to do if his identity were revealed. The boy turned to the director and excitedly begged her not to go to the palace. Facing Jack's worry, Sheila gently comforted him, assuring him that she would be fine and nothing bad would happen. The heroine hugged the boy and told him to wait patiently for her return. Jack tried hard to hide his true feelings, mumbling that he wasn't worried, but then added firmly that she had better come back safely. Touched by his concern, Sheila turned to all the children and announced that when she returned tomorrow, she would bring them a new friend. The children asked curiously who it was, and Sheila told them she would bring back someone who could protect them all. On the way to the palace, the heroine pondered her plan. She remembered that, according to the original story, a specific place in the palace would be open during the reception. Sheila was certain that the person who became Rudy's fencing instructor in the original story would definitely be there. Sheila's plan was to slip away quietly from the reception at the right moment. She was counting on her low status to keep her unnoticed by others. Sheila tried to convince herself that she just needed to stick to the plan, but anxiety still gripped her. She was even more nervous than when she wrote to Duke Clayman, wondering if she could really pull this off. She worried about how the Duke would react. If he knew her plan, he would probably be fuming. The carriage was finally arriving. She prayed desperately that the Duke was at the palace right now. Meanwhile, Dietrich had been waiting impatiently outside for half an hour. He looked at the clock, getting increasingly annoyed. The guard finally announced that the Duke could enter. However, instead of being invited to the audience hall, he was taken to the Emperor's private office, which naturally displeased Dietrich. He greeted His Majesty respectfully, while making it clear that he found the meeting place unusual. The Emperor waved away the formalities and told him to sit. He began by congratulating him on successfully reaching the trade agreement, noting that it would greatly boost the Empire's development. The Duke expressed his thanks politely. Then the Emperor got straight to the point, saying he was curious how he had found the trade route to the Western Kingdom. The Duke replied briefly that he had an assistant. The Emperor pressed on, asking who this assistant was. Dietrich gave the name Rick Henneman. The Emperor immediately guessed it was the second son of the Henneman family. The Duke confirmed this, adding that he was indeed a very shrewd and capable man. Finally, the Emperor commented pointedly that the Duke was victorious on the battlefield and now highly successful in trade, exceeding everyone's expectations. The Emperor said something surprising, that if the Duke were his son, he would value him greatly, certainly far more than the late Duke Clayman did. He pressed further, wanting to know if the Duke agreed, reminding him that the former Duke had insulted and despised him, calling him a monster before throwing him onto the cruel battlefield. Then, the Emperor changed the subject, saying he heard that I was sponsoring an orphanage. Feigning curiosity, he pointed out that I had never done anything like that before and found it interesting. I remained calm, telling him that the Clayman family was planning to launch some charity projects in the future. I added that this sponsorship was just the first step. The Emperor admitted it sounded reasonable, but he wouldn't let it go, asking me directly why I cared so much about Miss Sheila's orphanage. He emphasized that my attention to that place was unusual, then hinted by asking if I had any special relationship with the director. I told him that my private relationships were none of His Majesty's business, and besides, it was just a normal relationship between a patron and a beneficiary. The Emperor said he understood with a hypocritical smile. So I asked if I could be excused, and without waiting for his answer, I walked out. After he left, the Emperor asked his courtier about the prince's whereabouts. The courtier replied that the prince was probably hiding somewhere. The Emperor scoffed, adding that it was pathetic for the prince to react so strongly over a few words. He ordered them to find the prince immediately and bring him back. Then the Emperor muttered to himself that he needed to plant a few people in the banquet hall. He wanted to see if the orphanage director was truly insignificant to the Duke, or if she might become his fatal weakness. Meanwhile, the Duke walked on, thinking that it had been a long time since anyone had called him a monster. Miss Sheila's recent words echoed in his mind, saying the Duke was the strongest and kindest person she had ever met. Meanwhile, as Sheila walked toward the palace, her attention was caught by a sound like a child crying. Certain the sound came from the garden, she began to wander nearby. A few minutes later, the girl discovered a little boy who asked in terror, "Who's there?" The child was terrified, asking if his father had sent her. Hearing the word father and seeing the blonde hair, Sheila suddenly realized who he was. She thought, no way, he is the second male lead of the original story, Sadie Frizz. The heroine immediately recalled his fate. He trusted no one and was obsessed with Rain, all stemming from his tyrant father's cruel upbringing. The poor guy desperately tried to fill the emptiness in his heart with some kind of love. He was the only prince in the Empire's history who failed to win the heart of the one he loved. Sheila couldn't believe the second male lead was so cute as a child. She felt he was just like a puppy. Seeing she didn't answer, Sadie grew suspicious, saying she looked suspicious. The boy's words snapped the heroine back to reality. Sheila thought quickly. She figured that after today, she would likely never step foot in the palace again, so she could pretend not to know him. The heroine decided to introduce herself, simply saying she was a passerby who had just arrived at the palace and got lost. She told him it was her first time at the palace, and she had lost her way while walking. Sadie asked suspiciously, "Really?" Seeing her excuse work, she secretly rejoiced that little Sadie was still naive and innocent. She breathed a sigh of relief. The heroine began to slowly approach him. The boy asked in panic why she was coming so close. Sheila replied that her legs were tired and she wanted to rest next to him under the tree for a while. Sadie asked indignantly again why she was sitting next to him. The heroine replied that this tree looked particularly comfortable. The girl told him to ignore her. Then the boy asked again if she really didn't know who he was. Sheila repeated that she didn't know, as it was her first time at the palace. Confirming her lie had worked again, the heroine was secretly delighted. Then she seized the moment and asked gently why he was crying and if something bad had happened. The boy just retorted resentfully that he was a stupid loser with no good points. He felt that everything he did disappointed everyone, and then he dropped the bombshell, saying he wished he had never been born. After listening, Sheila calmly and thoughtfully repeated his last words about wishing he had never been born. She had heard such things before, but she stood her ground, saying there is no one in this world who shouldn't have been born. The boy was very surprised and asked her why. Sheila explained that if he hadn't been born, she would be very sad because then they wouldn't have met and this conversation wouldn't be happening. With a glimmer of hope in his voice, the boy asked again if she really thought so. Sheila confirmed it decisively. The girl added that a minute ago she was feeling down because she was lost, but now meeting him made her feel happy. She said their meeting was a huge stroke of luck for her. The boy still didn't believe it and asked if she was making fun of him. Sheila swore she meant every word. Touched by her sincerity, he started to talk to the lady, wanting to ask her something, but he was interrupted. A maid found Sheila and blurted out excitedly that the banquet was about to start and she had to hurry over. Sheila told the boy she had to go, but he didn't want to let her go. He begged her to stay a little longer, pleading with her to at least tell him her name. A few seconds later, the chamberlain walked up to His Highness. He informed Prince Sadie that the banquet was about to begin and he was ordered to bring him back. The chamberlain wondered who the woman with His Highness was. Suddenly, the prince asked him if he would still care about this boy, even if he weren't the crown prince. The chamberlain said that even if the boy weren't a prince, he would still be an important person to him. Prince Sadie was happy to hear this and asked him for a favor, to keep a certain request completely secret from his father. The man agreed, saying, "Your Highness, please command." The prince ordered him to find the woman he had just been talking to. The steward promised to find out her identity as soon as possible and report back. Now we come to the royal reception, where the crowd cheered for His Majesty the Emperor. Everyone present remarked what an honor it was to see the Emperor, the Empress, and the Prince. Meanwhile, Sheila thought that since the royal family was all here, she just had to wait a little longer before she could slip away. She was also desperate to know when the Duke would arrive because her stomach was growling with hunger. Our heroine suddenly remembered she hadn't eaten all day. Something caught her eye, a super cute little cake that she just had to taste. After tasting it, she excitedly said it was delicious and praised the royal chef, calling his skills incredible. This gave her an idea. She should bake a cake for the children when she got back. She was super confident in her baking skills. Suddenly, Sheila began to worry about the children at the orphanage, concerned about them being home alone. She fretted about hiring someone to look after them, knowing she couldn't just pick anyone off the street. She wondered if she could find a kind, good person for the orphanage tonight, someone completely different from Ramanda. A guest told her that the banquet was top-notch, exactly what one would expect from the Emperor. The man admitted he was captivated by Miss Sheila Perrin's beauty. She was surprised he knew her name. The stranger said he had been watching her for a while, especially her Sylvia orphanage. He announced that he was now interested in becoming a sponsor and asked if she was disappointed that he had harbored doubts before. Miss Sheila said of course not, while thinking to herself that dealing with him would be a constant trouble. After saying goodbye and excusing herself, she tried to leave, but the man stopped her, saying he wasn't finished yet. Miss Sheila stated politely but firmly that her orphanage was not accepting new donors. The man immediately guessed that this was because she had already secured the support of the Duke Clayman family. He asked annoyedly why she only accepted Duke Clayman's sponsorship and refused everyone else. The girl demanded he let go of her hand, telling him he was hurting her. The man hinted with a smirk, asking if her relationship with the Duke was particularly intimate. Miss Sheila coldly retorted that he was imagining things and was angry at his nonsense. But the man did not back down, insisting on asking what exactly the relationship between them was. Since the man was so desperate to know, the heroine remained calm, saying it was a patron and beneficiary arrangement. Suddenly, the Duke appeared in the banquet hall and announced he was ready to explain why she rejected him. Dietrich basically said coldly, "She simply doesn't need help from other families. Is that explanation enough for you?" The man was completely stunned, and so was Sheila herself. Duke Clayman pointed out that the man was gripping Sheila's arm too tightly, almost causing a bruise. Embarrassed, she tried to say everything was fine and her arm didn't hurt that much, but the Duke insisted she get it treated. This gesture of concern infuriated the man even more. He shouted indignantly that this was not like a normal patron-beneficiary relationship at all. The Duke calmly explained that he stopped him only because he was being too forceful. The man was about to deny it, but the Duke pointedly noted the use of violence against someone who disagreed with him. Dietrich asked in a tone laced with disapproval, "Do you not even understand basic principles?" Suddenly, the man's attention was drawn to something in the distance. Sheila wondered what he was looking at, and then she realized he was looking at the Emperor himself. Only then did she understand that this whole setup was likely carefully orchestrated. As soon as the guards appeared, the whole situation changed. Baron Ferrante roared in fury. "What on earth are you trying to do?" The steward said firmly, "Sir, you are causing a disturbance. You must be escorted out." The Baron tried to argue, claiming he was acting on someone's orders, but the steward interrupted him, explaining, "I am acting directly on His Majesty's orders." Just then, the Emperor addressed the crowd. "I didn't expect such a commotion on a day like this." Then the Emperor turned to Miss Sheila, addressing her very politely as the director of Sylvia Orphanage, and reminded her that she had once refused his funding. The girl bowed respectfully, saying it was an honor to meet His Majesty and apologize for the earlier incident. The Emperor magnanimously accepted her apology and stated that since Duke Clayman was already supporting her, additional help might not be needed. Duke Clayman then interjected, asking the Emperor for forgiveness. He explained that he intervened because Baron Ferrante seemed completely out of line. The Emperor said he understood the situation, and since the Duke vouched for the Baron, everything was fine. He concluded by hoping the frightened young lady would recover soon, and then left the banquet hall. After the Emperor left, Sheila replayed everything that happened at the banquet in her mind. She concluded that Baron Ferrante's entire scene was arranged by the Emperor to test the Duke's reaction and probe his relationship with Miss Sheila. Just then, the Duke asked if she was okay. Still a bit shaken, she answered yes. The Duke thoughtfully suggested she go rest. As she walked, she felt depressed because she felt the Emperor's attention on her was an ominous sign. Meanwhile, Miss Sheila racked her brain trying to figure out what the Duke was thinking when he intervened. It seemed to her that even he was surprised by his own impulsiveness. The Duke admitted he didn't know why he did that. Dietrich explained that he just saw she was in danger and his body reacted before his brain. He apologized for any embarrassment he might have caused her. She immediately replied that he didn't need to apologize and that she was actually very grateful. She admitted she tried hard not to show it, but she was actually terrified. But when the Duke appeared, she felt relieved. The Duke said it was only natural to help someone in danger. He reminded her that he had promised to protect her. Then her thoughts returned to the Emperor. She worried that people would think she was involved in the trade matters. But Dietrich reassured her, saying he had already told the Emperor that Rick was helping. What bothered him more was that stupid rumors might spread that they were more than just patron and beneficiary. Miss Sheila gasped, imagining the chaos that would cause. The Duke asked with a hint of sarcasm if Sheila was offended by the scandal of the Duke's family and a fallen noblewoman. The girl laughed it off, calling the idea of them being a couple ridiculous. Dietrich told her to forget that nonsense, his tone suddenly turning serious. He said softly that he wasn't worthy of someone like her. Surprised, Miss Sheila asked him to repeat it, not having heard clearly. Then the Duke added bitterly that a monster cannot be with a human. Hearing that word, the girl wondered if he was referring to his nickname god of death on the battlefield. She looked at the Duke with an incredibly gentle gaze and said that even if the whole world thought he was a monster, she would be willing to be a monster too. Sheila told him that in her eyes, the Duke was one of the kindest and most upright people she had ever met. The Duke was clearly moved by her words, admitting softly that he had never heard anyone say that about him before. Miss Sheila replied with a gentle smile that she would repeat it every time she saw him, reassuring him again that he was a good person. He called her name tenderly, but just then, the bell from the clock tower rang, interrupting their conversation. The Duke explained that this meant the banquet was over. Sheila suggested they leave before being seen, but he asked her to wait a moment and then thanked her from the bottom of his heart. She thanked him back for everything he did today. Later, a hooded figure stood near the gate. The hooded person claimed to be Miss Sheila's maid and tried to leave the estate, but the guard stopped her, reminding her that no one was allowed to leave. The girl insisted that her mistress had ordered her to fetch an absolutely vital personal item. She added that if she returned empty-handed, they would both be in big trouble. Hearing this, the guard relented. Arriving at the carriage, the maid boldly climbed in. The angry coachman questioned if she knew whose carriage this was. He pointed out that only nobles use such carriages. Then, the strange woman pulled down her hood and asked if he was the coachman. The man confirmed it. Then the girl ordered him to take her to Cannes and to be quick about it. The heroine arrived at the Cannes Casino, the largest legal gambling establishment in the empire licensed by the dynasty. Huge amounts of cash flowed here. At the entrance, they asked her what her business was. Following instructions, the girl gave the code. "I'm here to pick up my child." They agreed to let her in. The heroine knew that an illegal slave auction was held in the basement of this legal establishment once a year. As soon as she walked in, she wanted to recoil from the filth, and a strong scent of hypnotic incense hit her. The guide explained that this scent was particularly effective on beastmen. When Sheila asked why the scent was so strong today, she was told it was because a high-level beastman was being auctioned. The guide explained that it was a feline beastman, and she and everyone else were there for him. The girl thought with cold determination that none of them would get any slave today. She walked up to a guard and pretended to faint. Noticing her distress, the guard asked her what was wrong. The girl apologized, saying the scent was much stronger than usual and she was very sensitive to it. Sheila asked for an antidote and added with a sly smile that she knew there was a high-level beastman auction, so she had prepared ample funds for it. She asked who would be responsible if she fell ill and couldn't buy what she wanted. The guard understood her meaning, agreed with her point, and gave her a small vial, suggesting she use it like perfume. He said one spray would be enough. The girl was relieved, thinking how wise she had been to fill her perfume bottle with plain water beforehand. She pretended to use the medicine and said she felt much better. Then she asked the guard if there was any news from Vincent. He became flustered and asked, "Who?" She repeated it confidently. The guard tightened up inside, realizing she knew the alias of the underworld emperor, Shadow of Cannes. This meant the lady was part of the inner circle, and he was scared. The girl said with feigned regret that she thought the order had been given. She demanded to see the beast man before the auction started. The guard objected that the merchandise had to go through the auction to be priced. But our heroine interrupted him with a dismissive wave of her hand. She told him not to worry. She didn't plan to buy anything, just wanted to look. She added cunningly that otherwise Vincent wouldn't allow it, right, guard? Putting him in a dilemma to achieve her goal. She asked the guard what happened to the guy who annoyed Vincent at the last auction. The threat worked, and they took her to the basement. She secretly worried. She had only meant to scare him, but judging by the surroundings, Vincent really did punish those who disobeyed. The guard explained that the cage was specially made with magic stones, and all precautions were taken to deal with a powerful beastman. They could only control him with hypnotic incense. When she saw the prisoner, she couldn't help but gasp in amazement. She asked to get closer, but the guard warned that it was too dangerous. The girl insisted that since the prisoner was completely restrained, he couldn't do anything. But the guard was firm, strictly forbidding touching the cage, saying the beastman was a very dangerous creature. Nevertheless, the heroine approached the cage alone. Alone with the imprisoned beastman, the maid whispered his name, Hoyen. The prisoner's ears twitched almost imperceptibly. Sheila promised firmly to help him get out of here, but only if he helped her too. She asked him to nod if he agreed. Suddenly, a small explosion occurred. Sheila's action was interrupted by a guard screaming in terror, asking what she had done. Suddenly, the guard was hit hard and fell dead the next second.